Okay. We're live, I think. Let me make sure. Yeah, we're live. Okay. So, I'm gonna be doing my Genshin Impact dailies like I normally do. And then we're probably gonna talk about some of the stuff that's happening in the industry. Particularly UE5. UE5 games are gonna start coming out later this year. Hopefully, Tekken 8 is probably gonna be the first one. I am really tired this week. I've had a really rough week. So, we'll see how this stream goes. I don't know if it's gonna be super long or if it's gonna be a short one. Where's the, like, chicken in this? Oh. There. Almost level 50 on the battle pass. So we're getting closer and closer to the 7800X 3D launch. I think it's next week. Or maybe it's... No, I think it's the week after. Yeah, it's the week after. So one more week to go before that launches. And then the circle of all the gaming PC components will be complete, at least for this cycle. Obviously, there are newer graphics cards that are coming out later this year for the high performance and the mid-range, all that stuff. And AV1 streaming is right around the corner. Almost, at least for YouTube. I don't know about other video streaming platforms, but at least for YouTube, it's in beta now, so it is making progress. Who was this? Why do they always do that? Like, why do they... Well, it's too late now. I guess I can still try to get this thing. Oh, I'm glad I got this. This was easy. So, a couple things. E3 was canceled. So that's a disappointment for those that were looking forward to E3. I feel like E3, it's been a long time since the glory days of E3 when it was at its fullest. Oh, I don't have an archer for this. I can't stand up because this ruin guard is like standing on top of me. Okay, there we go. So we'll wait for more viewers to come in, and then we'll probably start talking about the news. The usual format. What is this? Dark, what is this? Like, okay. I don't know. Sometimes it's been a long time since I was questing or doing dailies in Mondstadt, but I completely forgot that they have quests in the ice mountain area too. There's even a fishing area here that I didn't even realize was here. Head to the mountain cavern on Dragon Spine? Oh. Place the package near the mountain? Okay, so this is the last one that I have to do, I think. Oh, this thing is done? Okay, yeah, we're done with that. Oh, I haven't done the Archon quest in forever. Anyway, so that's it. That's all I need to do for Genshin Impact. So let's look at some of the news articles here. Okay, so the first news article, E3 has been canceled. Why is... Okay. So the first major one is E3 is canceled. So E3 has officially been canceled. Let's bring that up. Okay, here we go. Okay. So E3 is officially canceled as organizers simply did not garner sustained interest. That's disappointing because it's been a long time since E3 has been the big kind of show that happens in the summer or in the early summer, late spring. It used to take place, if we go far enough back, it used to take place in around May, late May. So basically the end of the school year. And then it was early June, and then it became mid-June, late June. And then it kind of went back and forth a couple of weeks, depending on the year. IGN confirmed that E3 has been scrapped. E3 co-organizer, the Entertainment Software Association, reportedly quietly sent out an email to members saying the show was off, despite being a beloved event and brand. They further explained that this year's show simply did not garner the sustained interest necessary to execute it in a way that would showcase the size, strength, and impact of our industry. This is what I mean when I say, like, it's been a long time since E3 has been big, like how I remember it. From the glory days, if you will, of E3 being the place where, you know, you would have the Sony and the Microsoft sections like right next to each other, and Nintendo section, and then Ubisoft usually had a section. EA may have had a section. So it was a really big, nice show. In my mind, ever since E3 kind of fell off and became small, it all started when Sony stopped attending, and Blizzard started doing their own thing, because Blizzard also at some point long time ago it did have a presence at E3, but then BlizzCon became a thing and they wanted to promote their own thing, and then the Game Developers Conference was happening earlier, a few months before E3, so E3 just kind of sort of died off, unfortunately. Because I really liked it. I thought it was a really cool show that happened once a year that anyone who was into video games, the gaming industry in general, could look forward to. It just kind of, over the last 5 or 6 years, it just trailed off into nothing. I think of Computex as the big show that happens in June now. Like, as a PC enthusiast, Computex in Taipei has really kind of replaced E3, at least for me, as kind of the big show that happens in the middle of the year. Because before that, you know, we have CES in January, so that kicks off the year. And then there's some other stuff in the middle, like we recently had GTC, GDC, but then there's really nothing between CES in January and then Computex in June. There's literally just those two shows, and then you have a bunch of things on the gaming side that happen in the second half of the year. So Gamescom, which takes place in the European Union. I think the location, it's usually in Germany, but it kind of depends. I think the last several ones have been in Berlin, or sometimes they're in Denmark, I think, or Brussels. I forget exactly where the last several Gamescoms have been at. But Gamescom is a big one that has slowly been gaining more attention because E3 has since E3 has kind of fallen off a cliff, that void has been filled by Gamescom. I think Gamescom has become a larger showing. Although I could be wrong because I haven't ever been to a Gamescom, so I don't really know. And then the other one would be TGS. The Tokyo Game Show is the other really big one that happens in, I think, early October or sometime in late September. That's usually when that one takes place. And that's pretty much it. That's all you get. So it used to just be E3, Gamescom, TGS. They're spaced out about, 2 to 2.5 months apart. So yeah, the first half of the year is pretty boring. Usually you get a lot of the games that I guess the publisher doesn't expect those games to do that well. So they just kind of throw those games out in like Q1, for example. But I don't know, because in the last few years, Q1 has seen some of the best games that come out in a given year. So case in point, Elden Ring was a Q1 release. Hogwarts Legacy was a Q1 release. At least for me, the most anticipated games that were on my list usually launch in Q1, at least in the last few years. Elden Ring, Horizon Forbidden West, Stranger of Paradise, Wolong Fallen Dynasty, Resident Evil 4. The list goes on. Hogwarts Legacy. Like, Forspoken, I mean, that was kind of an anticipated game for me, but not really. Like, I never really expected that game to be that great, and I was right. But that was another Q1 release. In previous years, Sekiro was a Q1 release. Kingdom Hearts 3 was a Q1 release. Lots of really big games launch in Q1, even though Q1 is often the kind of downplayed quarter of the year for game releases. I feel like most of the really big ones typically launch in Q4 because that's the holiday season. Like Cyberpunk was a big one that launched in Q4. Dark Souls 1 was a Q1. Skyrim or Q4. Those were all Q4 games when those games launched. And those were really big games. So Q1 is kind of the under the radar, we don't know if this game is going to be that great, so we're just going to kind of toss it out in the middle of January or whatever. But sometimes Q1 has some really good games. Like Q2, I think Q2 is the one that usually, I don't know. I kind of think in the last few years, Q3, so July, August, September has become kind of the boring part of the year for game releases. Like, what's a big game that launched in Q3 in the last 2 years that's memorable? Right, not that many. So I can't really think of one. I'd have to go back and look at my list to find one. But I know usually Q1 and Q4 are the really big ones, at least for my list of games that come out. Usually you get an expansion for like an MMO or some big name AAA game they usually get their expansion in the summer or the fall. So those could be Q3, but sometimes those are also June, which is technically Q2. So it all kind of depends. But it's disappointing that E3 is kind of nothing anymore. Did I see I have no idea what the pricing on that is. Is that like an official thing, or is that still a rumor? Isn't that what we thought it was gonna cost? Didn't I say on the previous stream that the 4070 would be 600? I don't remember anymore. I remember the rumors were like 750, and I said that's complete false. It's never gonna happen. Okay, yeah, that's probably right then. I saw the post in the Discord. Isn't that what I thought it was gonna be though? Didn't I say that? I thought I said $5.99. I'd have to go back and look at the stream and look at where I wrote it down in Paint. But yeah, it's it's gonna be like a 12 gigabyte card, right? I mean, that's better than the 4070 Ti. 600 for 12 gigabytes is certainly better than what 800 for 12 gigabytes. So E3's canceled. Unfortunate. Oh well. Man, this summer is gonna be really boring. Like this, I mean, Computex is gonna be super boring this year too. Like, what? There's nothing to talk about at Computex. Like what? Just new motherboards? Maybe EVGA announces a new like motherboard or something. I don't know. This is just really disappointing news. $4070 at $600 is a better deal than 4070 Ti at $800. However, you know, a 3070 Ti was $600. Now we have what's essentially a lower tier product, the non-Ti, for the next generation, selling at the same price. I don't really think that's gonna tide over well with gamers, but kind of depends on how it performs. You know, obviously it's not going to be as fast as a 4070 Ti, which means it's probably not going to be that great at all. Well, I mean, depends on how much weaker it is, because if it's only like 10% weaker than a 4070 Ti, then it might end up being the best value GPU. Although the AMD ones are probably going to still offer better value. Because the 4070 at $600 is most likely going to make a lot of sense. Because the 6950 XT is going to be faster than it, and it's $700 right now. So the 6950 XT is what I think the 7800 XT is going to perform like. So you know, that could be like 700 or 649. The AMD card could be like 649, but it's like 15 to 20% faster or something like that. Well, maybe not that much faster, but you know, you get what I'm saying. Like the AMD card, well, I don't know, cuz I don't know what AMD's memory allocation will look like. I'm guessing 16 gigabytes of memory for the 7800 XT. I think it would have to be 16 because the 6800 XT was 16. I don't think AMD is going to do a memory bump because they don't need to. Unless it's a cut down variant of the current chip, which would be like a 7900 XL or something like that internally. I don't know. Here, let's look at this. Let me go to this link real quick. Okay, so 4070 will be $200 cheaper than the 4070 Ti, which means it will be the same price as the 3070 Ti. And this is, so the 3070 had an MSRP of $499, which means this is a $100 upcharge over the last generation. So depending on how you look at this, it doesn't look good. It doesn't look good because it's not, yeah, I know, 8 versus 12, but the thing is, like, $100 upcharge versus 3070. I mean, so far out of all the Nvidia cards, this one's price does make the most sense. It's the most sensible compared to the other three that are currently in the market. The current three cards from Nvidia, for me personally, price-wise, all three of them are a no-go. Like, they're all way too much money. All three of them, for what they are. The 3070 Ti is also only, yeah. So, the same card, but with a new name. We already know that. This is priced to match that at launch. Interestingly, the price has not changed much, even 1.5 years later after launch. Yeah, that's the thing. 3070 Ti has always been terrible value. It's never sold at MSRP. Even 1.5 years later. However, despite all of that, these two, the 3070 Ti and the 3060 Ti, were among the most popular Ampere cards. That is so depressing to read that. Those were both terrible graphics cards. The 4070 will be around 3080 level at lower resolutions like that. Why would it lose at 4K? Is it because it's a worse memory bus? I need to get some water. I'm like... It's set to launch on April 13th. Oh yeah, this thing's what, like a 192? Oh yeah, 192. Wait a minute. The card will feature just as many CUDA cores as 3070, but the memory will be upgraded to, with that, okay, that barely makes any difference. It will have 4 gigabytes more, despite the narrower memory bus. It'll still have higher maximum bandwidth thanks to 21. Okay. 504 gigabit per second versus 760. Yeah, this thing sounds like it's not going to age that well. Now, it won't be memory limited the way the 8 gigabyte cards are. Man, this just looks so backwards to me. 8 gigabytes at 256 versus 12 gigabytes at 192. That just looks so backwards. And it has it has... So this thing is basically, yeah, okay, so it's a cut down 4070 Ti, but yeah, okay, it's 8104. Okay, so these are not even like, at least this revised naming scheme from Nvidia makes a lot more sense than what they were trying to originally call the 4080, or what is today the 4070 Ti. The 8104 is a dead giveaway, but yeah, oh man. Well, at least they fixed the name. At least they fixed the name. It'll age like 6700 XT. I guess, but what do you think? What do you think people would pair this up with, like, in terms of a monitor? I'm curious to know, like, what people who buy 70 series cards, what is the monitor resolution? Like, what's the target monitor resolution? 1440p? Is this meant for 1440p? Like, it would be nice to know what, not only what Nvidia markets this for in terms of the target resolution, but what do actual consumers pair this GPU up with? Like, if they're pairing this up with a 1080p monitor, it'll be fine. But if they're pairing it up with a 1440p, it will also be fine for a while. For a pretty good while, too. Hey, Marcelo. Because at 14, even at 1440, 12 gigabytes isn't bad. But yeah, I guess this sort of graphics card would be considered 1440p at best. Hey Joey, is this... Huh. A couple of us were watching it but didn't see the chat. You close it and log back in. Yeah, I didn't see anybody's chat except Met Prism and Marcelo. And now I see yours. So something... That's weird. That's weird. The stream has been going for 30 minutes. Maybe... I don't think it was my internet. I never got any notification that my internet went down. So I don't know what happened. I just noticed that there was no one chatting for a while. It was just... Oh, and Wolf. But the stream was visible the whole time? That's weird. Yeah, that is really strange. I shouldn't be streaming to 2 different places. I don't know if that's possible. I'm not trying to do like a dual stream to like twitch.tv or anything. I'm not sure what happened there. There's 2 streams? There's 2 streams? Okay, I need to go and look at it then. Hold on, let me see. What happened here? What did I do? There should not be 2 streams. Oh, there are 2 streams. What? Yeah, okay, hold on. Let me, how do I stop the first one? I think I know what happened. Alright, let's delete that one. Or just close that one. Okay, there should only be 1 now. The one that was titled 4080 launch is completely wrong. That's an old template from, I don't know when that was like back from the 4080 launch. Yeah, no, that's way wrong. So there should only be 1. I don't know why. You know what? I think I know what happened. I think I clicked start streaming and it started to stream, but I forgot to update the title, and it loaded like the template that has the 4080 thumbnail, and that's probably why that happened. And then I clicked stop streaming, then I clicked start streaming again, and then it created the correct one that I wanted, but it kept the old one going for some reason. Okay, there should not be 2 of them anymore. Now, if someone was still watching the original one, I don't know what will happen to that. If that just kind of like goes offline or what. It'll be interesting to see, like, if you guys still have the first stream open, if you refresh that, what happens? Does it just die off, or does it say this video has been removed? Or does it say this video has been deleted or something? I don't know what it's gonna do. It'll be interesting to know, though, for someone that's currently watching the other broadcast, which shouldn't exist anymore. But basically, if you were watching the one that said 4080 launch, or whatever the name was, yeah, that one's completely wrong, so... It just vanished from your history? Okay, okay. That's weird. So I stopped it, but the thing is, I don't know what YouTube does with it, so... It just vanished. Okay. Yeah, I think so. Out of all the NVIDIA cards, the 4070 actually, it makes the most sense. I don't like the idea of spending I don't like the idea of spending $600 on a 192-bit bus GPU. Yeah, I think D-Wolf will have to come over here. He'll probably refresh the stream, and it might automatically. Well, actually, I don't know. I don't know what will happen. That must have been weird. I think that's probably why. That's probably why I didn't see any viewers when I first started the stream, because I was like, why do I have 0 viewers? And it was like 10 minutes in, it was still like 0 viewers. So that means everybody was on the other one. Uh-oh. Well, that means that a lot of people just got kicked off that stream. Because I closed it, or I didn't close it, I stopped it, and then I ended the stream, but then I think YouTube probably is just going to like combine the two. I don't know what it's going to look like in post. But anyway, 4070, it looks like a better deal than 4070 Ti. Just looking at the cut down, like how much they're cutting it down. They are cutting it down quite a bit. The 4070 Ti actually has more CUDA cores than the 3070 Ti, whereas the 4070 only has the exact same amount as the 3070. However, just by looking at the 4070 and the 3070 Ti, the 4070 looks like it's going to be faster than the 3070 Ti, while using almost 100 watts less power. And it has a smaller, narrower memory bus, but I still think it's going to beat the 3070 Ti. I don't think it'll win by a lot, especially like what MetPrism was saying at the higher resolution. 4070 Ti is not equal to 3090 Ti, Joey. It's weaker. 3090 Ti is better. 4070 Ti is equal to 3090, the regular 3090, and the 3080 Ti. So I think the 4070 will be slightly faster than 3070 Ti. Just by looking at these specs. Yeah, April 13th. That means that this kind of lines up with the launch of the 7800X3D. Because that's launching soon also. That launches on April 6th, which is literally a week from today. And this thing launches 2 weeks from today. I don't follow GPU user benchmark. I don't think that's accurate. Hey, Deuce Wolf. Yeah, I heard you were watching the incorrect stream, the one that should not have actually went live, but somehow it still stayed live. Yeah, user benchmark is basically garbage in terms of determining what's what. But yeah, in general, if you want to know what a 4070 Ti is equal to when you're comparing it to the 30 series, it's typically the same as a 3080 Ti or a 3090. The regular 3090 is usually what it is. So yeah, so yeah, so basically if somebody, the only people that I can see buying a 4070 is probably going to be people who are on 20 series GPUs. Like, for instance, if somebody is on a 2070, well, let's think about this, though, because they're going to be spending a lot more money to upgrade than what they paid for when they got the 2070. Like, back in 2018 or 19, whenever they ended up getting one of those. Or if somebody's on, like, an AMD Radeon, going from RDNA 2 to this doesn't make any sense. So, like, if someone's on AMD and they want to get an NVIDIA card, like a 40 series card, and $600 is the maximum that they would spend, I would say anyone on, like, a 5700 or a something older. Well, 5700 XT was like $400. So this thing is like $200 more than that. It is a lot faster than that GPU, but it's kind of hard to, you know, it's so hard to justify like spending $600 on a GPU that has a 192-bit bus. Yes, the 12 gigabytes of memory is good. I'll say that's good. The 200 watt TDP is also good, so that means it's pretty efficient. And it's basically, it's going to perform like I agree with MetPrism. I think the 4070 is going to be very similar to a 3080, all things considered. 2 more gigabytes of memory, unless we're talking 12 gigabyte 3080. If anyone has those rare unicorns, but yeah, those things do exist. But most people don't have them, so it's kind of irrelevant. But the thing is, this thing is going to be kind of like a 3080. It's $100 less MSRP. And it's like way less electricity, you know, like 120 watts less power or whatever. So I guess if somebody, this makes sense for somebody who is on 10 series or 20 series, because, or I guess like the AMD 5000 series, or like a Vega 64 or something, like, or even, you know, the few people that have Radeon 7, but I can't think of anyone I know that's using it, that ever used a Radeon 7 for gaming. Radeon 7 was usually used for a Hackintosh, or for like Final Cut Pro on Mac, or like a Hackintosh, like I just said, or it was used for like workstation uses. Radeon 7 at the time was actually really good for video editing with DaVinci Resolve, because it was the first 16 gigabyte graphics card that was under $1,000, because it was like, what, $700 for a 16 gigabyte graphics card that had, and the thing is, it was 16 gigabytes of HBM2 memory. So Radeon 7 for production is actually really nice. Like, I used Radeon 7 with my my Threadripper PC for a good while. Like, when I built the Threadripper PC back in 2019, or maybe it was 2018, I think it was like late 2018 or early 2019. But yeah, it was early 2019, because it was Radeon 7, right? Like, I built the Threadripper 2950X PC with the Radeon 7. So it was literally built as a workstation. I never built that for gaming. And that's the reason why, that's the reason why, in my opinion, graphics cards and just computer hardware in general, the use case matters the most. So it's like, you don't just look at gaming benchmarks to determine a purchasing choice, right? Like, most people, that's all they do with their PC. They just want to play games. That's totally fine. But like, for production use cases, you know, there's more to take into account. You're still using 980 Ti. Problem is, it's in a... Yeah, that's pretty rough. That's pretty rough, 980 Ti. I'm surprised that 980 Ti is still alive, honestly. I know a lot of people that had the VRM on their 980 Ti, like, die after, like, having the GPU for 3 years or whatever. Yeah. Yeah, that screenshot that MetPrism posted on the relative performance, that's accurate. I would agree with that. And see that screenshot shows that the 3090 Ti is basically the same as a 7900 XT. And that's the reason why when I did my resizable bar and smart access memory comparison, I wanted to compare using the 3090 Ti and the 7900 XT, because I knew that those two GPUs are very similar. And if you go back and watch that video, you'll see that in most cases, those two graphics cards are very similar in performance. Sometimes, well, you have to go back and look at the video. What I remember is they were very close, and in some cases at the higher resolution, they were very almost dead even, like it shows in that screenshot. But at the lower resolutions, the RDNA 3 was a little bit faster than the Ampere card, the Ampere flagship. But, you know, it was within 5%. So they were so close that you would be hard-pressed to be able to perceive the difference between the two of them, even at 1080p. Yeah, but remember, Joey, you're not testing a lot of games, though. What this chart from Tech Power Up shows is it's a mix. It's mostly games, but they do have some synthetic benchmarks on there, like 3D Mark, for instance. But the thing is, if you average them out over the course of testing like 30 games or whatever, the 7900 XT is definitely faster than the 3090 Ti. I'll agree with Tech Power Up 100%. I have both cards, right? Like, I have the 3090 Ti Founders Edition. I have the 7900 XT reference card. I've tested them both. And, you know, I can 100% agree with Tech Power Up that the 7900 XTX is definitely faster than the 3090 Ti. 100%. Yeah, but it depends on what you're doing with Blender, though. Yeah, it depends on the productivity, though, because in DaVinci Resolve, it's not that way. Yeah, the Tech Power Up results, though, they're not really showing a lot of productivity. It depends on what you're doing, though. Like, the thing is, the reason why, what you'll see, typically when you see productivity benchmarks, a lot of that is looking at CUDA acceleration. And when you're looking at CUDA acceleration versus something like OpenCL, then, yeah, the NVIDIA card is going to be faster. Yeah, so in my case, I use DaVinci Resolve. Like, that's the only editor that I use. I don't use any of the other ones. Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. Yeah, it depends on your use case. So if you're doing a lot of apps that use CUDA and benefit from CUDA acceleration, then yeah, obviously the NVIDIA card's going to show the better numbers. But the thing is, for some of these apps, now I'm only speaking based off of what I've seen, because I personally don't use a lot of these other apps that use CUDA. You can use ROCm. There's like plugins for not just OpenCL, but like ROCm is a thing. Actually, you probably want to look at that. Maybe I'll do like a video about that. So ROCm, so ROCm, it is basically like an open platform it's basically CUDA, but it's just kind of like an open standard. Let me see. I think it's like a software stack that AMD created, or not created. Well, maybe they did create it. I'm not even sure where it came from. Let's just look at it real quick. So ROCm isn't okay. So AMD did make it. It's a software stack for graphics, but the thing is, ROCm is basically like the open source CUDA, or it's not really open source CUDA. It's more like it's like a translation layer that can take like CUDA code that was made for CUDA and essentially like make it run on Radeon GPUs. So, but you don't see this tested, right? Like, this is something that you'll never see if someone's benchmarking the stuff. So that's why I'm saying, like, the NVIDIA cards, they also do OpenCL. But again, like, if you have an NVIDIA GPU, it would be better to test, or it would be better to use CUDA than to use OpenCL, because the performance with CUDA is a lot better than the performance with OpenCL. So that's the reason why it's like looking trying to compare productivity apps, it's kind of a mixed bag, or it's very hard to do where it's kind of like an apples to apples comparison, because, you know, why would somebody test like OpenCL on a GeForce card, or like even just like a professional card, like a workstation card, like what used to be called Quadro. I really wish Nvidia never got rid of the Quadro naming, because now it's like, if we're talking about workstation graphics cards, we have to say like Nvidia, but that's such a broad name. Like Nvidia RTX A6000, for example. You know, it's wrong to call it a Quadro because they don't use the Quadro name anymore. Yeah, so that's right, and all of that is because of the CUDA acceleration for the VFX. That's a really tough, like, see, that whole thing on the production side is where Nvidia kind of has a monopoly. Like, it's a very, very tough market for anyone, including AMD, but obviously AMD's like the only real alternative, right? It's a very tough nut to crack and get into that market, because Nvidia basically has a monopoly in the productivity, or well, in like the production workspace for visual arts and that sort of thing. RTX A4000 will perform on Hogwarts Legacy with it being a full GA104 with 16. I mean, it's still not going to be that much better. So the thing about the A4000, the thing about the production cards, they don't clock as high as the GeForce cards. So the clock speed on an A4000 will be lower typically. I think we can look it up. So they redirected from Quadro, but Quadro isn't even the thing anymore. I don't even understand why, like, it even did that. See, Nvidia messed themselves up when they did this. So this is I don't think this is correct. Like, I don't think it's called Quadro anymore. I think it's literally called Nvidia RTX A4000. I don't think it's called Nvidia Quadro RTX A4000. But these things have a lower they have a lower clock speed than the GeForce Die equivalent. So but yeah, this is something that's not talked about much, because it's still kind of like an effort to get this up to speed to be more on par with CUDA. So that's why it's like, whenever we talk about productivity benchmarks for graphics cards, I don't really like to go there, because it's so hard to get actual proper comparisons between those two. The Affinity Photo uses OpenCL. Yeah, and the other problem with that is, and this is more on like AMD to improve that, is it's just the development optimization. It's the optimization side. So obviously Nvidia has a much larger team to devote to optimizing for these individual applications. But yeah, in general, if we're talking about performance, the productivity stuff, it's like not even really worth talking about, because it's so, the performance is all over the place, and it's mostly in favor of CUDA acceleration. Yeah, I know. I agree, Wolf. Like, AMD really does need to kind of step up their game on the productivity side. It really does. They really do. Like, it's not really a competition. That's why how often do you see people doing productivity comparisons between the two of them? They don't really do it, because it's really all just Nvidia or basically AMD, but AMD is like so far behind. But yeah, like that's the main thing though. Like, what's the What's the market capitalization of Nvidia? 26 billion? Well, that's not the market capitalization though. Like so what I'm trying to say is like, obviously Nvidia's better is what I'm saying in productivity, but a lot of that is because they have more resources to devote to optimizing with all these third-party products for productivity. How many employees does this company have? 26,000? Actually, you know what? That's not that much larger than AMD. Wow, so AMD's at 25,000 employees now? Man, AMD has grown, like, the amount of employees that they have? These guys used to have, what, like 10,000 employees? NVIDIA's 26,000. This is very recent, 2023. As of 2023, NVIDIA has like 26,196 employees. 26.97 billion in revenue. AMD 23. So, man, that's wow. Like, that's way larger than I thought they were. Because I knew these guys were small. These guys have always been like the small. I always think of AMD as that kind of scrappy company. Like it's like the story of, to use like a biblical reference, it's kind of like the story of David and Goliath. That's how I've always, well, okay, that's more like Intel and AMD, where Intel is Goliath and AMD's David from the story. But like Nvidia is also kind of really big, but I'm surprised like Nvidia's not that much larger than AMD. I'm really surprised that AMD has that many employees now. You guys also have to remember that more than 2/3 of Nvidia's employees are software developers. So think about it like this. Nvidia has 26,196 employees. More than 66%, almost 70+% of all of those employees are software programmers, which means that they have a lot of staff to optimize for these applications and also the drivers when it comes to games. Like, you got to keep that in mind. Whereas AMD is mostly a hardware company still, although what I've heard is that a lot of their new hires are meant to be working on software. So it's kind of like an ongoing thing, right? Like, AMD doesn't want to be that scrappy. Like, who wants to always be like seen as a scrappy little company? You know, like the comeback kid, the karate kid. Like, that's basically what AMD is, or what they were. But you don't want to stay like a company, or even an individual doesn't want to stay like that forever. Do you remember? Or yeah, I know about VIA Technologies. I remember. So I had a motherboard that had a VIA Technologies chipset back in the day. It had an onboard audio chipset made by VIA Technologies. It was my AM3 motherboard, the one that could support the Phenom and the Athlon 2. That had a VIA onboard sound chip. You find it odd that both CEOs are blood related to? Are they? Are they really? Or is that just kind of like a... Hold on. Are you serious? Is the CEO really... Are the CEOs really blood relatives? I don't think they are. Wait a minute, what? Sue and NVIDIA co-founder and CEO Jensen Huang have been described as... Okay, hold on a second. Distant relatives, in air quotes. Distant relatives. According to Sue? What? Okay. I always thought that was kind of like some kind of internet meme that it was fake. But okay, apparently they are. Well, I think anyone that's a big fan of NVIDIA should know that Jensen Huang used to work for AMD. He used to work for AMD before he founded NVIDIA. It even says right here, after college, he was a director at LSI Logic and microprocessor designer at Advanced Micro Devices AMD. On his 30th birthday in 1993, he co-founded NVIDIA and is the CEO and president. So he's done that ever since. So in the early 90s and late 80s, he worked at AMD. At some point in there, he worked for AMD. Imagine Lisa Sue and Jensen Huang meeting you for the holidays. So here's something that I know. During the tenure of, what was the name of who was the other CEO at AMD? So not Lisa Sue, but like Hector, I think his name was Hector Ruiz. Hector Ruiz tried, AMD wanted to combine with NVIDIA. So this guy, when he was the CEO of AMD, he approached Jensen Huang and asked if they want to like combine companies. Somewhere, it either was him or it was like one of the CEOs. It was not the original CEO. It was, I think it was Hector. Somewhere in there, like it. All I know is when they were gonna combine NVIDIA and AMD long ago. Like remember, this is before AMD acquired ATI. So AMD wanted to first fuse with NVIDIA, but it fell through because Jensen Huang wanted to be the CEO of the combined company. And I think they didn't want him to do that, so it just kind of fell through. So it had to have been Hector who wanted to combine with NVIDIA, because this was before they acquired ATI. And for those that don't remember, ATI was the big rival to NVIDIA in the early 2000s and basically through the second half of the 90s. So okay. Are we going to paint? Does everybody want to go to paint? Hold on. I'm blind. Hold on. I gotta make it not blinding everybody. I don't really know this that well in terms of the timeline. So people who remember computers from the 90s are going to have to help me out on this. But all I'm going to say is in the 90s. So we all know NVIDIA was founded in 1993. 1993. NVIDIA was founded in 1993. But basically, all I really want to say about this is in the 90s, it was a bloodbath between a bunch of small little startup companies making graphics processing units and securing contracts with Japanese game console developers, like for instance the Sega Saturn, the Sega Dreamcast, the Neo Geo, all those like console Atari stuff, all that was based out of America. But basically what am I doing? Like there's 93, 94, I'm just gonna do 95, 96. Basically, in the 90s, you had 3DFX. People are going to have to help me remember the different names, because I'm not too familiar with how the PC hardware space was in the 90s. But basically, there was 2000, and then it kind of changed. We'll go up to 2005, I guess, because that was when ATI gets acquired. And then NVIDIA loses their rival. And it basically makes NVIDIA and AMD enemies. Because a lot of people don't know this, but nowadays, people always try to pit AMD against NVIDIA all the time because of the graphics cards. But the reality is the two of them used to actually team up a lot. And a lot of people don't know that. It's almost like I'm becoming like a historian of computer hardware. I feel like I do a lot of live streams where we end up doing this kind of stuff. So we'll go up to 2006, I guess. That'll be the last year. Because It gets kind of bland, or it basically gets to the way it is today after 2006. Saturn GPU was the basis for the first NVIDIA GPU, the NV1. Wasn't the very first NVIDIA GPU called the GeForce 256 or something? Are you going to be playing The Last of Us Part 1 on PC? Possibly. Possibly. Hold on. Yeah, I think I might. Their HQ is literally a few blocks from one another. Imaginely Sue. Okay. So 3DFX. So there was a bunch of companies in the 90s. 3DFX. There was one like SIS, I think, or SI. I forget what was it. What was the name of that one? I forget the name. Voodoo. Was Voodoo 3DFX? Yeah, Voodoo was 3DFX, wasn't it? 3DFX had the Voodoo, I think. Voodoo 3 or whatever. I forgot what the names were. Like, I don't remember anymore. S3. Matron. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Cardboard snail nose. S3. Matronx. Hercules? There was one called Hercules? So there was 3DFX, S3, Matronx, NVIDIA, and yes, that's how it was spelled back then, and then ATI was another one, which we all know who they are. Basically, there were a lot of different players. There's more than just these. These were just the ones that were more well-known, name-wise, branding-wise. But the thing is, there was a lot more than these guys. Didn't VIA also make a graphics processing unit at some point? Hercules was one of them. Like, there's a lot. I think VIA had one. Didn't Intel also make one? Or didn't Intel try to make one? I think Intel tried to make one in like 1997 and scrapped it. So I guess they don't count because they scrapped it. They never actually released a product. Okay, VIA bought S3. But the point is, S3 started out as their own thing. And they got acquired by VIA. But I think VIA tried to do their own. Oh, Intel released a product. Okay, so they make the list. Okay, so basically there was a lot of them. There's more than these. I just can't remember all of them. Let me see if I can remember the other one that I'm thinking of. Silicon Integrated Systems, SIS. So, Silicon Integrated Systems, the reason why I remember them is because these guys, I don't think they ever made a discrete graphics card, but they made motherboard chipsets that included graphics processing units in them. So I don't know if these guys were basically like cross-licensing a small embedded processor from one of these. Well, probably not Intel, but you get the idea. There was a lot. Yeah, I remember there being a whole lot of brands. There was a lot of competition back then. So all of these guys that you see here, they existed basically throughout the 90s decade. So all throughout around this time span, we had all of this choice. 3D Labs. Yeah, 3D Labs. Cirrus Logic, but that's... Yeah, they may have died off in the early 90s. So the point I'm trying to make is there was a lot of different choices. But the problem is when you have a lot of competition, so upgrade cycles happen really fast. The only problem is, so like, what's the pros and cons of this? What's the pros and cons of having all these choices? Pros. Lots of choices. Faster upgrade cycles. Faster improvement. Or I guess well, that's faster upgrade cycles. Power VR, oh yeah. So lots of choices and faster upgrade cycles, and typically you also get lower prices. Power VR. If you could run Command and Conquer. Or like AoE1 or StarCraft 1. Well, I mean, StarCraft 1 was not... Maybe not StarCraft 1, but like AoE 2 was kind of hard to run. But yeah, like these are the types of... This is the thing. But what's the bad thing about having like too many different choices? Lack of standards. Because of the increased amount of innovation, you get lack of standards because the standards will end up changing so much faster. Meaning one company might try to come out with some like accelerator technology for whatever, for the games. They might partner up with a game developer and show off this cool technology. But then like they have the patent on that. So the other competitors, they'll try to scramble and develop their own equivalent, or they'll just completely ignore it and just release their own new feature that's innovative in some completely different way, right? So you get lack of standards. So because of lower prices, oftentimes you get what I call a race to the bottom. Basically what that means is companies will end up going out of business because in order to try to compete on things like price and lower the prices, they'll try to undercut each other to get market share. And that's a huge gamble for the company that's doing that, because they could basically rack up a whole lot of debt, and then if they're not able to recoup that, you know, like in whatever year or whatever time frame they need to recoup that in order to turn a profit, like they basically go out of business. And that's usually what happened to a lot of these companies. They usually got bought up by other companies, or they got just bankrupt and died or whatever. So you bought one and 5 months later it was already... Yeah, exactly. So that's the faster upgrade cycle. So we talk about now, like in today's world, GPU upgrade cycles from the manufacturer standpoint are every 2 years, about every 24 months or 2 years. That's how easy it is to predict when a new GPU is going to come out in terms of a new generation. It's every 2 years. But the thing is, you get higher prices. You have to wait longer. If you're an enthusiast, you don't like it as much as how it was in the 90s because you have to wait longer to see technology change. But if you're the average person who just wants to play games, you actually prefer the way it is today versus the way it was in the past, because you have standards and you have like fixed release cycles. So you know, like for instance, if you're somebody who skips a generation, like for example, if you're on the RTX 30 series or the AMD RDNA 2 GPUs, like the 6000 series, you don't need to upgrade this generation. Like you can skip the 40 series completely and you'll be fine. And you can also skip the RDNA 3 GPUs, the 7000 series, and you'll be totally fine. So you can go for like, 3 to 4 years without having to upgrade, because you know that it's a 2-year life cycle. If you want to play at native 4K, you will need to upgrade your GPU every 2 years. For now, at least. Although, what will end up happening is at some point, the GPUs will basically solve that problem, where 4K will slowly become what 1440p is today, and then it will eventually become what 1080p is today, where at some point, like a mid-range GPU can handle 4K games on average at decent FPS. So, lots of pointless... Wait, cards? Lots of pointless gimmicks. Arguably will still have it if you want to play it native. Yeah, the whole crypto scalper situation with last gen kind of messed that up. Yeah, so the people who were on the 20 series and like a 5700 XT, for instance, they were fine. Everybody else who was on like 1060s and RX 580s, they were basically screwed for the last couple of years. And even now, they're still kind of screwed because there are no... Well, I mean, unless they're going to buy like last generation, when it's already like 2 years old, they're still kind of screwed over, right? Because there's nothing really affordable for people who bought like 1060s. Another pro for cards back then were over-the-top box art. Yeah, I remember the ATI cards box art looked pretty crazy. What's some of the best 4K gaming monitors? Not curved. The one that I have. The one that I have. I knew you were gonna say. I was waiting for you to say that because I was gonna mention Intel Arc. Yeah. Yeah, there are some exceptions, like the 16GB A720 is a pretty good value in the $300-ish price range. But the thing is, like by this time, so by around like 2000, this was gone because Nvidia bought them. I don't know what happened to S3. Medtronic doesn't make GPUs anymore. I don't know when they fell out of the market. I don't think VIA has made anything notable in many, many years. I don't know what happened to Hercules. I don't know if they're gone or if ATI acquired them or whatever. Intel left and was gone for the longest time, only making the integrated graphics in their CPUs. But they're back. Somehow. They're back now. And then these guys, I don't know what happened to them. I have no idea. No idea. No idea. So, basically, realistically, I should cross Intel out because they basically died and then were resurrected somehow in the graphics space. Like many, many years later. Decades later. So, realistically, that only left 2 of them. 2 were left standing from the ashes of the GPU war in the 90s. The massive free-for-all that took place in that era. Felt wrong paying $1,000 plus for top of the line. You don't think that Genie is going back in the bottle? Power VR is still around. Oh, they're making mobile chips. Okay. Okay, I did not know that. So anyway, you guys get what I'm saying. So Power VR, so I'm still going to cross them out because they're still alive, just like Intel's still alive. But they don't compete in the enthusiast graphics space anymore. And technically, Intel doesn't either, so they deserve to be crossed out as well. So really, that only left 2 standing from the ashes of the 90s war, right? So today, like, so we all know, like, I think it was in 2005, AMD acquires ATI. I think it was 2005, or it was either 2005 or 2006. Anyway, somewhere in here, AMD bought ATI, and that's the reason why AMD now is kind of the Radeon brand. So, but it used to be ATI. So ATI is one of the OGs from like the 90s war that took place. But ever since then, it's basically been, you know, Team Red, Team Green. Although, remember, AMD used to be Team Jungle Green. Like, AMD was Team Green. It used to be like, you don't mind paying more than $1,000, but when you do, it better feel like you're getting way more hardware than you are currently. Yeah, it needs to be a noticeable upgrade. But that's pretty much how it was, like, in the graphics card world. So the thing with, so how did we get to where we are today with the, well, we understand the gaming market, but I guess going back to productivity, so NVIDIA invested heavily in software development for not just the driver, mostly the driver, but also, like, other things, right? So the productivity software applications. So, like, the things that, you know, Joey was mentioning earlier, professional applications. NVIDIA invested heavily in this space, and that's why they benefit a lot from that early investment. So, because a lot of, like, movie production is all done using NVIDIA. For example, like for the CGI in films, in Netflix shows, all that stuff is done using NVIDIA graphics, NVIDIA professional graphics, Quadros, and things of that nature. So, or even just like the server-based workstation GPUs. So, like the the A620, for example, and those GPUs, things of that caliber. So I think the reason why the Radeon cards kind of fell behind is because you had, basically, ATI got acquired, and then the problem is AMD accumulated a lot of debt. They had a hard time competing with Intel. They had very, very bad management in, like, the 2000s decade. Even though they were very successful in this era. So AMD from, like, 1999 to, like, 2006, this was, like, the golden era for AMD in terms of how successful they were, in terms of the chipsets. Like, for example, AMD plus NVIDIA. You had AMD 64 Athlon plus the Enforce chipset. Does anybody remember this? Does anyone even know what I'm talking about when I'm mentioning these things? So, I might do a video about this. I might actually do a separate video about PCs in the past and how they've changed. Because I still have this motherboard. I still have my very first motherboard. And my very first CPU. You guys have already seen my very first GPU. But NVIDIA used to make the chipset for AMD's CPU platform. Hold on. How the GPUs became more expensive than the rest of the system. So having too many competitors hurt the market, and only having two hurt it too. Yeah, in different ways. Although, if I had to choose between the chaotic 90s for computer hardware, at least in the graphics space, versus the way it is today, it's hard to say which one I would prefer. Honestly, if I had to choose between the two of them, I kind of think the 90s were better, because like, having so many competitors kept the prices way more affordable. Have that 64 Athlon as well. See, the fact that a lot of people here are mentioning that they had AMD Athlon 64, that is a testament to what I was saying earlier about this era being the golden age of AMD. So, like, late 90s, like, basically the turn of the century, up to, like, 06, was the best years for AMD. So, some people might argue that they're better off now with Ryzen and Radeon than they were in the early O's. I don't really. Well, yes and no. I guess brand wise, no. Because I kind of think AMD was more well respected in the O's than they are today. Phenom 2 came later though. Phenom 2 was like later O's, but yeah. So like Athlon 64 was basically the thing. You ran Linux on that computer? Oh, you had an AMD Athlon 64? Phenom 2, Athlon XP, and Force 2 was... Yeah. NVIDIA should only make high-end or Titan class, and AMD can provide the whole product stack with Intel providing... That would be really, really weird. If... I don't think that would work. Like, if NVIDIA only made the super expensive GPUs... And if AMD made the middle and then Intel had the entry level, that wouldn't make any sense. Because I don't think a company can stay profitable if it only makes, you know, like the super high-end GPUs. Because they're not going to get volume. And then if you only make the entry level, you're always just worrying about your bottom line. And then if you're only in the middle, then you're just kind of like... You know, there's really nothing super interesting to get excited about if all you make is just mid-range. So, I don't know. Like, I don't think that it works that way. Like, you kind of have to have the whole product stack. Intel felt more corporate back then. AMD felt like it was made for us. Yeah, AMD in the early O's was way, way more well-known. So, the thing is, like, a lot of people don't pay attention to, like... gaming media outlets as much as they used to, but so GameSpot, IGN, like if you guys know these large YouTube channels, so these guys used to have most of the internet traffic from the gaming market because like IGN and GameSpot in the 2000s, these two were huge. Like they were way bigger than they are now in terms of the amount of influence they had on the gaming market. And I remember, like, the gaming test systems that GameSpot and IGN would use to review games, they were all AMD 64-based systems. And I remember, like, a lot of people who were doing PC DIY in the early 2000s and mid-2000s were basically always building AMD Athlon PCs. I don't really know of anyone who I knew personally back then building their own custom gaming desktop using an Intel Pentium 4, because the equivalent of this was like an Intel Pentium 4 or a Pentium 3. And then later on there was the Pentium Duo or the Pentium D, but then AMD had the X2. So AMD had the 64X2. AMD also had FX. AMD FX, I'm not talking about FX 8350, I'm talking about Athlon 64 FX. You know, like they had the big $1,000 CPU back in the day. Rest in peace, E3. Yeah, we were talking about that earlier. Yeah, and actually, this was the time when E3 was huge. In this era that we're talking about. Like, this is the era of, like, the transition from, like, first-gen MMOs like EverQuest, Final Fantasy 11, which Final Fantasy 11 is technically, I consider it, at least in its original form, I consider it a first-gen MMO. It was the transition to second-gen MMOs, which would be like, WoW, the first Guild Wars. You know, like, this is the sort of stuff that was happening in this era where AMD dominated the CPU. Well, I won't say dominated the CPU market, because we all know how Intel kind of, like, kept the contracts with the OEMs so that Intel could essentially flood the market with OEM pre-builds, and they could stay dominant in that regard. But anyone who was a PC DIY enthusiast in this era, you typically would build an AMD 64 system. And you would pair that up with 32-bit Windows XP. You were running Windows XP 32-bit on an AMD 64-bit processor. Like, no one was running Windows XP 64-bit, and I don't ever really understand why. But yeah, that was kind of a thing. And typically, RAM in this era was like anywhere from 256 megabyte DDR1 to like, you know, anywhere to like 2 gigabyte DDR1. But it was, you know, like 2 gigabytes of DDR1 back in like 2004 was a lot of money. So for example, if you had a PC with 512, so like 512 megabyte of DDR is roughly equivalent to like 16 gigabytes of DDR5 today. Or I guess DDR4, whatever, DDR5 today. Like, basically, if your PC had 512 megabytes of RAM back in, like, 2005 or 2006, 2004, that would be like you having 16 gigabytes today. And then if you had, like, 1 gigabyte of DDR1, that's like someone who has, like, 32 gigabytes today. In today's RAM count. So, like, 2 gig would basically be, like, 64 gigs of RAM. So, and then like 3 would be like the ultra enthusiasts, although, or I don't know. 4 would be kind of like having 128, but the thing is, like, 4 would be kind of the absolute max, because if you're running a 32-bit operating system, you weren't actually being able to benefit from like 4 or more gigabytes of RAM. So yeah. My first PC was 512 megabytes of RAM, DDR1. So I started with 512 on my Athlon 64 socket 939 PC, and I ended with 2 gigabytes on that exact same PC. And I had that PC for like 4 to 5 years, and then I finally upgraded. So I was on DDR1. I don't even remember when DDR2 came out. I think I missed the boat on DDR2 by like a few months or something like that. Because I built my first PC in 2006. Like the summer of 2006 was when I built my PC. And that was AMD Athlon 64 single core with DDR1. So that wasn't even like state of the art at the time. But you know, back then I had to like save up a ton of money. And then I couldn't really afford like the latest and greatest back then. So I mean, that's what I ended up getting. So, Athlon, XP, and Force 2. Yeah. Yeah, I know like a lot of people that had Athlon XP. And they all kind of were wanting the AMD 64 or the Athlon 64. Your first PC was an Office one with a 1 gigabyte of DDR2. Yeah, I remember those Office PCs with the shell. You have an old system here out of the case. Has an 8-bit motherboard, DDR2. Your first PC was the AMD X86 glorified. Oh, was that the clone? What was the 5x86 133 the clone of the Intel 486 or something like that? Back when you could run AMD or Intel in the same motherboard. Yeah, that was the clone. Yeah. Yeah, I remember reading about those. A Cyrix? No, I never had one. All I know is my very first PC was an AMD CPU with an NVIDIA chipset and an ATI graphics card. So I had everything but Intel on my first PC. Unless, no, I'm pretty sure that the Ethernet was not Intel. I'm pretty sure it was like Realtek or something. Quick format with a floppy equals magnets. I mean, you could even mess up like spindle drives with magnets though. But yeah, that's hilarious. You can format floppies with magnets. Yeah, those PCs, the x86 133, that was during the war of like the GPUs, right? Like the big free for all in the 90s. Because I feel like the golden age for Intel. What would be the golden age for Intel? What do you guys think is the golden age of Intel? Would it have been... I think I know what the answer is. I think it's like literally right after AMD's golden age. I'm pretty sure like Intel's golden age was like 2006 to basically when Ryzen launched. It was basically until Ryzen launched. Golden age for Intel's first. That's what I was gonna say. Yeah, it was literally like right after it, because the golden age. So we have what 07, 08, 9, 10, 11, 12. Okay, I think this is all we need for Intel. So the golden age for Intel would have been literally like right here. Basically up to 2013, I guess. So, but literally like up to where it was like 10 years ago. This is Intel's golden age. There. That's so weird how they're like right next to each other. Because you guys have to remember, like, the AMD... So, the reason why I think AMD was more respected in the 2000s decade than it is today is because you have to remember, like, back in this era, AMD had three primary, like, branding names. So, they had Athlon... So they had something called Sempron. Sempron, I think? Sempron was their Celeron. They had Athlon. They had Turion. Turion was their mobile chip for laptops. And then they had Opteron. This was the server chip. This becomes Epic. Turion becomes like Ryzen Mobile. Athlon becomes Ryzen. Sempron becomes Athlon. so this is basically what their product stack. This is the old AMD product stack of like the legendary golden age of AMD. And then this is basically what they have today. I think they still use the Athlon name for like the super entry level CPUs because they don't use Sempron anymore. So this is basically meaning in the golden age of AMD, they had the full product stack. You could basically buy anything. Phenom came later. Well, I can talk about Phenom, but Phenom showed up in like 2008 or somewhere around here was like the first Phenom, the very first Phenom. I'm talking about Phenom, not Phenom 2, but the original Phenom. And then Phenom 2 was like 2009, 2010. Like, that was Phenom 2. So, the problem with Phenom, and the reason why people don't really talk too much about it, is because it launched and it was forced to compete with Intel's Nehalem generation. And then Intel launched their big, like, prosumer stuff. So, like, the triple channel, like, Gulf Town and all that stuff. But then Intel kind of, like, cannibalized the sales of their high-end desktop when they launched Sandy Bridge in 2011. So, Intel basically kind of dominated themselves in a way. But yeah, Phenom was there. But Phenom, okay, if we had to label Phenom or include Phenom is kind of like here. But Phenom was never really part of the golden age of AMD, if that makes sense. Phenom came later. Like, the problem with Phenom was it had to deal... Phenom launched in the golden age of Intel, and it had to compete with some of Intel's best CPUs ever. But the thing that I will say about Phenom is, unlike Bulldozer and the FX series, so like FX8350, FX8150, all that stuff, Phenom was still competitive with Intel. So, meaning, Intel launched Conroe in 2006. Conroe comes out. That is what ushered in the golden age of Intel, was Conroe. So, Conroe was good. So now okay, let me just put here so people, AMD CPU line, I guess. We'll just say that, and we'll just draw like a line here so people can understand what we're talking about. And now we'll do the Intel one over here. So Intel had, so we all know they had Celeron. The name's still kind of around, I think. Celeron. So Celeron competed with Sempron. And I guess today the Celeron would compete with Athlon. Although, actually, you know what? I don't think Celeron's around anymore. I think Pentium became, or Celeron became Pentium of today. I think Pentium's still around, right? Like, well, anyway, the one on the left is the old one. The one on the right is the modern one. They had Pentium from their old lineup. Pentium became Core eventually. Well, not eventually. It became Core like pretty quick. And then Mobile was basically, what was the name they used? Basically, they used, like, Pentium Mobile. Centrino, I think. Centrino was not really a CPU, though. That's more like a SoC, sort of like a packaging name. But I guess Pentium Mobile, Pentium M, became, like, the mobile core stuff. So it's like the laptop stuff didn't really change that much. Intel Atom was, I guess, but Atom is very, very low power, so it's like, Atom showed up in that decade, and it was always kind of around. Atom's just, like, nothing. It is what it is. Atom became Atom. And then they had, for the CPU, Xeon has always been Xeon. Like, Xeon is still Xeon. So, that name didn't change. So, that's kind of like, these two didn't really change. So, they don't have new names, and then, like, this is kind of what happened here. So, it's funny how, like, Celeron became Pentium, just like how Sempron became Athlon. Like, they reused their good name, Athlon, but they made it their budget line, super entry-level stuff. Now it's just Intel processor. Okay. I guess. Intel Itanium. Did they ever actually launch any product with that name, though? I don't ever remember seeing a product with the Itanium name. So the thing with Intel's golden age was Conroe came in, but Phenom was still competitive with it. AMD's response to the Conroe and the Core series was Phenom. Because, so what people need to remember, or I guess what you need to be aware of, or I guess what I want you to learn from this, is that during the golden age of AMD, like, it was always Athlon versus Pentium. That was the battle. Athlon versus Pentium in the golden age of AMD. But in the golden age of Intel, at least in the first part of it, it was the Core versus Phenom. So AMD was fighting with Intel's Core, and they were still pretty competitive against Intel's Core. Like, AMD was still able to leapfrog over Intel's Core, at least like the first and second editions. Like Conroe came out and it was good, but then Phenom was response, and it was a valid response. But then we know what happened in 2008. In 2008, there was Nehalem. Nehalem was basically the first Core i7. Because I guess what I should say here, I should say Core 2 versus Phenom. Because then when it became Core i5, i7, or, you know, like even the i3, i5, i7, then, okay, we'll just say the first i7, the Nehalem i7 versus the Phenom 2. It became i7 versus Phenom 2 because in this era, like, Nehalem came out, and it was really their first, like, big new. Well, Conroe was the new architecture. Nehalem was the first, like, new big, really enthusiastic thing. But then, when they launched their big, you know, triple channel. So basically, Intel launched something called X58. X58 chipset from Intel. Like, this thing was what I call big Nehalem. This was something called, I think, Gulf Town or something like that. I forget the name. I think I'm right. I think it's Gulf Town. It was based off of Nehalem. It was Intel's first HEDT. The X58 chipset. It featured triple channel DDR3. So this was kind of the first really big high-end desktop from Intel. And this thing launched, I think it was or sometime in 2010, if I'm not mistaken. But it was Nehalem based at its core in terms of the architecture. But then it was in 2011 when they launched the Sandy Bridge architecture, which is really what. Not only did Sandy Bridge cannibalize Intel's HEDT and made it kind of redundant and almost irrelevant, except for like the PCIe lanes. But even then, like the first gen HEDT from Intel didn't have that many PCIe lanes. It did have triple channel memory. That was kind of its major selling point. But then it really kind of made it very hard for AMD to compete because Phenom 2 was much slower than Sandy Bridge. Just like how Nehalem was now slower than Sandy Bridge and IPC. Nehalem, at least the X58, still had like I guess, it had its own kind of niche because it's an HEDT platform, kind of like Threadripper. But then they launched, I guess AMD responded with Bulldozer, and we know how that kind of flopped. So basically, it became Bulldozer versus the Core i7 and the Core family, like the modern Core family, right? The 3, the 5, the 7 versus FX, AMD's FX line. And that's kind of how it was for a long time. And that's kind of why I consider this Intel's golden age because a lot of people say that Intel stagnated and like messed up the market as a result of that. But that's not 100% true. In the typical consumer market, yes, they did kind of stick with 4 cores, 8 threads for the highest end i7 for a very, very long time, basically all throughout their golden age. However, Intel did launch these HDD platforms. So Intel launched X79, which was Sandy Bridge E and Ivy Bridge E. E standing for extreme. So, for example, the Sandy Bridge E would be something like an i7 3960X, which was a 6-core, 12-thread, $1,000 CPU. But they also had an i7 3930K, which was also a 6-core, 12-thread, and it was like $600. So, you know, you were paying i9 money for a 6-core, for like a 5600X, although this thing's not as fast as a 5600X, but you get what I'm saying. For like a 6-core, 12-thread, you were paying i9 money for a 6-core, 12-thread CPU back in the day, in like 2013 or 2012. Sandy Bridge E. And then there was Ivy Bridge E. Ivy Bridge E was so short-lived because it was stuff like the 4930K, which was largely forgotten and highly ignored, because then they launched X99, which was Haswell E and Broadwell E. Trying to think if this is correct. Yeah, that's correct. This was the first DDR4 platform. And this was like 2014. And that was basically the end of Intel's golden age, because at that point, the market really, for them, it kind of stagnated after Haswell E and Broadwell E. Do I know if IBM even made plans to expand PowerPC to everyone, or if it was just Apple consoles? I don't know. I think, if I had to guess, Marcelo, I have a feeling that IBM prepared to respond with a design for the consoles using PowerPC. However, I think that because the PlayStation 3 was so complex, that really left a bad impression for developers. And also, I think Sony was a lot more hesitant to go with some kind of non-x86, like some kind of weird custom design, like with the PS3. So I think that's kind of the reason why. To answer your question, I think the answer is yes. IBM did have a PS4 prototype chipset that they planned to sell to Sony or Microsoft, like if they were interested in that also. But ultimately, Microsoft wanted to push x86, so that's the reason why AMD ultimately won the design win for that RFP. So that way, IBM was kind of out of the console market after that. 5920K was pretty impressive at the time. Yeah, that was the Haswell E. Haswell E was basically stuff like the i7 5820K, the 5960X, and then Broadwell E was like the 6900K and the 6970X or 6960X. I forget some of the numbers on those. Because I know Intel would have like a 60X, and then they would, and then like the following year, they'd release like a 70X or something as like a refresh for their HEDT platform. But that was basically the end for like Intel's golden age, because after Haswell E, Broadwell E was just a rehash. It wasn't really worth like harping about Broadwell E versus like Haswell E. I just remember like the early days of DDR4, like you were typically running like 16 gigabytes at 2400 megahertz DDR4, or maybe 2666. The early days of HEDT and DDR4 were not really that smooth. It was basically kind of like that. I just put it like that. So yeah. And that would have been like 2014 for Haswell E, because Haswell was 2013. Devil's Canyon Haswell Refresh was 2014. And then Broadwell E, or Broadwell, just kind of silently launched and nobody even remembers it. And then Skylake was the first DDR4 consumer desktop in 2015. And that was kind of like, I guess if you want to include Skylake in Intel's golden age, I mean, yeah, I guess you can include it, but at that point, we're just kind of at stagnation. So the only thing worth mentioning in that, with that CPU architecture, was DDR4. And then after that, it was like Ryzen came out, and it's like, here we are today. So, yeah. So, yeah, just kind of like, that's how the history goes. I feel like, I feel like the computer, it's interesting, because on the one hand, if you look at how much technology has progressed in the last 20 years, it's amazing. Like, it's an exponential increase in processing power and the applications that are being realized today with things like AI. You know, like that being the new thing, and that's very GPU heavy. So despite having less overall hardware companies in the space, we do have a lot, like the acceleration of the technology is still at a really breakneck pace, I should say. So yeah. It's interesting if you look at the CPUs today, because it's so back and forth between AMD and Intel, even though Intel still largely has the lion's share of the market, because they're able to outmaneuver AMD when it comes to marketing and just straight up flooding the market with product and volume, it's a lot more back and forth. But can it run Crysis? That is the question. I guess the 2023 edition of that is, can it run Forspoken? Can it run Forspoken? Or can it run Hogwarts Legacy at 4K with everything maxed? Well, I guess Cyberpunk 2077 is the new Crysis. But Forspoken seems like it's definitely a contender for like the new Crysis equivalent. Okay, so I guess the other thing I wanted to talk about briefly was, now it's, can it run Last of Us Part 1? A game that isn't even new. Like, it's new, like the remaster to PC is new, but like the game itself isn't even new. That's like saying, can it run Crysis Remastered? But can it run Crysis Remastered? You know, like the remastered one. But like the thing is, The other thing I want to kind of mention is like game engines. Since we are talking about games like Crysis, for instance, game engines. I feel like with Unreal Engine 5 as an example, that's what I put in the stream title. I don't like when game engine, like, I don't like seeing the consolidation going on in the game industry when it comes to game engines. I don't like when one engine starts being the thing that a lot of games are developed on. It kind of goes back to the same with what we saw in the past, where you, like, back when we had lots of graphics cards, you had lots of games that would be developed from the ground up, no standardization, brand new engine every single time, and then over time, you know, with sequels to game franchises, then we started seeing, you know, companies reusing the same engine for their next game or their sequel, and then that's kind of where engines started becoming relevant. I think that was kind of the first generation of game engines, if you will. Like a game company deciding to reuse its code base from its previous game to make its new game, and that sort of thing. But there was a lot of redoing things from scratch. And then now, if you look at the way games are developed today, a lot of it can be done straight up from using a game engine and then just building all your scripts and stuff on top of that. And using all those libraries that are already kind of baked into the engine. So, I think the first game that we'll see that launches, I think it's coming this year. I'm not 100% sure on that, though. But I think the first Unreal Engine 5 game that will launch, hopefully this year, maybe this summer, I think at the earliest, would be Tekken 8. I think Tekken 8 is going to be like the first game. You know how Forspoken was the first direct storage game? I think Tekken 8 is going to be the first UE5 game. Crysis RTX? 35 minutes? Wait, to compile the shaders? Wait, compile the shaders for what? The Last of Us Part 1? Hogwarts Legacy doesn't take that long to load. Man, I might have to play The Last of Us Part 1 now. 35 minutes to compile the shaders? What? Oh, man. Hey, as long as it's not as long as it's not stuttering, you know, I guess that's the positive side of it. $7950X would make quick work of it. Yeah, and see, that's the thing. Like, those high core count CPUs, I think, can really help with loading or compiling shaders. Although it kind of depends on how multi-threaded those shader compiling is made. 100% CPU usage on that. Wow, okay, yeah. Yeah, okay. So those 32 threads on the 7950X would come in handy, I guess. Yeah, I might have to, I'll probably have to check that out now. You saw a guy playing it with 700 XT, and some parts of the game stopped to load. What? I assume it would do that when you're opening a door. Like if Cole is opening the door, is that when it would stop to load? That's how a lot of games do that, though. They kind of hide the loading from like opening doors, or going down, riding an elevator, or climbing up and down stairs where you're culling a lot of the assets because there's a wall in front of you while you're going up the staircase. Okay, that might be a game that I have to do, like, kind of like what I did with Hogwarts Legacy. I'll probably have to do, like, a performance analysis thing, or maybe something like take 3 or 4 GPUs and do them side-by-side comparison. Does Last of Us have a built-in benchmark? I think they'd be about the same, Wolf. I think when it comes to compiling stuff, like, they're gonna be really, really close. You could see the scenery loading in the background. Really odd behavior. Oh man, there's no benchmark. I really wish like all big AAA games would include a built-in benchmark. That just makes it so much easier to benchmark the game. Uh, Not really. All it's doing is sitting there loading stuff into memory. It's compiling the shaders and loading stuff into memory, into system RAM, not video RAM. I think. I could be wrong. But I wouldn't consider the shader compilation game benchmark. It doesn't have scene transitions. It doesn't test like lighting, global illumination. It doesn't test ambient occlusion. It doesn't do any of that stuff. So it's like, no, I don't think that's a benchmark. That's like a CPU benchmark. Yeah, it's a CPU benchmark is what that is. Yeah, but it can be seen as a benchmark for a CPU. I guess it could also be like a storage benchmark. It could be like an SSD benchmark. Like, man, the more I think about it, I'm like, yeah, I probably should test this game because I have a PCI Gen 5 SSD. I have the X3D CPU, and it's paired up with the Gen 5 SSD. Let me see, what were the other kind of things that I wanted to... I guess that was the big one. E3 was canceled. Was there anything else? Oh, there's gonna be some affordable entry-level motherboards. I don't really know how enthusiastic I would be about them. But there's gonna be AMD's A620 motherboards are finally gonna launch for entry-level AM5. Apparently it's tomorrow, per this article. MSI A620 PCB and pricing revealed. So it says, based upon the latest information that we've received, AMD and its partners will finally introduce the much-awaited and very affordable AM5 motherboards. One variant will be a cut-down B650 due to yields, and the other will be the proper A620 die, which will mostly be the more affordable option. So basically, the cut-down B650 sounds like it's going to be more higher end than the standard A620. I don't know how I feel about this chipset. AMD's motherboard partners will be optimizing the cost. Okay, so it says most options should be below 100 US dollars. So here's an example of one. Here's kind of like a blueprint. So the phases look fine. You've got your VRM here, and this one looks like it's there. Like, I'm guessing here's the voltage regulator. That's one of those is probably the memory, if not both, and then, or I think it's just this one's the memory right here. Here's the little SoC. So here's the A620 chipset or the B650 chipset. The A620 chipset will also feature no USB 20 gig ports, and USB 10 gig ports will be limited to just 2 compared to 6 on the B650. Paper thin PCB. This will probably matter the most for third world countries like mine where the motherboards cost. So, yeah, I think we talked about this in a previous stream, Marcelo, but how much would a $200 motherboard cost in Brazil? Like what would be like $200? Well, not $200, but if a motherboard was priced at $200 in North America, what would it be priced at in Brazil? Because I'm just trying to think, like, are these $100 motherboards really worth it? Because if you spend like $100 more, you could potentially get a much nicer motherboard with like full USB 20 gig and that sort of stuff. The PCH will get two USB 3.1 Gen 2, so those are like 5 gig ports, and retain the 6 USB 2.0 ports. Pairing these entry-level boards with something like a Ryzen 7000 non-X or an X3D for pure gaming would make for a super affordable yet super powerful PC. Expect more information. So the nice thing about the X3D CPUs that I do want to point out is that all the X3D CPUs are way more energy efficient at full load than the standard, like the X CPUs. So, for example, the 7950 X3D has a TDP of 120 watts, which had been like the golden standard for a very, very long time until Intel started pulling away from that with a much higher power consumption. And then AMD just kind of followed suit with the AM5 CPUs. So the gigabyte is... oh, man, that's a lot. Wow, that's a lot more. Yeah. 569 for a B650 Aorus Pro AX. So the Aorus Pro AX, that's kind of like the... yeah, that's kind of what I'm using for the... that's similar to the motherboard I'm using for the 7950 X3D. A620, yeah, so that... This is always confusing. Why do they list so many random old stuff on here? Oh, I guess to compare. You know what's really nice about this, though? You still get all your CPU lanes. You get 8 Gen 3. Oh, I see. Okay. So this chipset doesn't have any Gen 4. It's only Gen 3. It's 8 lanes of Gen 3, whereas B650 is 4 lanes of Gen 4 and 8 lanes of Gen 4 and 4 lanes of Gen 3. You can get the... yeah. Yeah, but remember, he's talking about... Marcelo's talking about Brazil prices, though. So the import tax is very high. So I guess, like, this to me... like, if this is $100, this is still pretty good. Because, look, you get 24... Gen 4, you get 8. So you basically, like, the total lane count is 32 lanes. 24 of them are direct CPU Gen 4 lanes. The remaining 8 are chipset Gen 3 lanes. So for if this was like $100, this plus a 7800X3D is going to be amazing value, because this is what, $100. That CPU is going to be like $450, so like $550. If you're near, well, I don't know about the free RAM though. I don't think there's going to be free RAM for a 7850 X or a 7800 X3D. I think the free RAM is only going to be for the standard Ryzen CPUs if you're at a Micro Center. But I'm just saying, like, DDR5 is becoming more and more affordable. So I can see like $550 plus RAM, depending on what kind of RAM you want to buy, like whether you're talking about 32 gigs of 6000 or 64 gigs of 5600, you know, like, seems like it could be a pretty good budget system. It's only a 2-DIMM motherboard, which can be a good or bad thing. Bad in the sense that it doesn't have, you know, you can't do like 128 gigs of RAM or more. But you could do potentially 96 gigabytes of RAM on this motherboard, assuming this motherboard would support the newer, more dense, the higher density RAM sticks. But the cool thing about this motherboard is because it's only 2 sticks of RAM, you could probably get like 6400 more reliably. 2 sticks at 6400 megahertz on like 32 gig single rank. Like that sounds like it's going to be pretty doable with this motherboard because it's a 2-DIMM motherboard. How are the DDR? They've been continuously falling. So like, for example, let me give you an example. Like, we can look at the DDR5 here. So here's 32 gigabytes. But this is, what's this? No, that's, yeah, what's the speed though? 5600. 5600, 32 gigs with an additional $7 off. So 115 minus 7 if you use the promo code. So, you know, that's not that bad. 32 gigabytes for this much. This is cheaper than 16 gigabytes of DDR4 back when Ryzen 1st gen launched, back in 2017. So, that's not bad. Like, here's the one with the fancy RGB. This one's 6000. This is the AMD Expo 32 gigabytes. DDR5 6000 for 160 minus 5, so 155. Cast latency 30. That's not that bad. That's actually pretty good. This is actually pretty good. This is the RAM that all the big YouTube channels used to review the Ryzen CPUs with when they first launched. Like, this was the RAM kit that everybody used. The cast latency 30, I think it was the 30, cast latency 30, 38, 3896. This is SK Hynix, by the way. That's SK Hynix RAM. So, you know, like 155 for 32 gigs at 6000, that's not bad. So, RAM has fallen in price so much. It's almost like every month RAM drops by like 3 to 5% in price. It's been falling the whole time. So, and that's good news for those who want to get the 7800X3D for a new gaming rig. So it's like this plus the $450 7800X3D plus the $100 motherboard. So, you know, that's very affordable. And everything else that you have for the PC would carry over. So the power supply would stay the same. The graphics card would stay the same. I mean, obviously, you can upgrade those components later on. So, yeah, I feel like April's going to be a very popular month for enthusiasts who want to build an affordable top-tier gaming desktop. So I think, like, MetPrism was talking about upgrading in April. So talk about timing the market. Like, that is really perfect timing. The way everything's kind of lining up. Because you have the cheaper motherboards to choose from if you wanted to go that route. Like, the option is there. That was not an option for people like me who upgraded earlier. So, that's nice to see. It's always nice to have the option. The Corsair Dominator Platinum. But this one's not as fast. So this is Samsung, so I'd probably avoid this one. This is Samsung again. So yeah, this one right here, sale ends in 3 hours. So normally this is 170 something. So this is kind of a really good deal for those that are wanting to pick up parts like a week or two early, like a week early from the 7800X3D launch. This is a pretty good deal to grab right now. But I don't think you'd have to worry too much about it. Like, it's one of those things where if you're gonna build the PC, just make sure you're gonna get everything all around the same window. So if something's defective, like if the RAM turns out to be defective, you still have that return window to exchange it. All the DDR5 sticks have RGB. No, not all of them. This one doesn't. This Corsair one doesn't have RGB RAM. Like, this is just the standard Vengeance. These ones have the RGB on them. But yeah, I would say not all the RAM has RGB. All the RAM that I use does not have RGB. So I don't have LEDs on any of my RAM kits. That includes all of my DDR5, DDR4, and DDR3. Well, DDR3 is kind of irrelevant today, but you get what I'm saying. This is really strange, Hynix RAM. Free 64GB micro SD card with purchase. Look at that. You get free 64GB of micro SD storage. If you buy 32GB of RAM, you get free 64GB. So this is an example of the more you buy, the more you save, I guess. I don't know. This is more Samsung RAM, but this one doesn't have the special deal, though. That's a strange bundle. I think it's a pretty awesome bundle, though. Like, if you have a camera or something, it's such a random bundle, but it's actually pretty decent. Yeah, Newegg sometimes has some of the random bundles. Like, I forget what this one was. It was like a free backpack or something if you buy a monitor, or I remember seeing like these weird ones where you get like a free, if you bought a power supply, you got like a free Lenovo Legion backpack or some it was something that seemed so unrelated. Like, you buy a monitor but you're getting like a backpack. Like, what would you need the backpack for? The monitor? Like, those two things don't go together at all. So it's like, I remember it's just random things like that. And of course the Newegg Shuffle had some of the most random, like, they would bundle like all these random motherboards with graphics cards, or power supplies with graphics cards, which was actually a lot more relevant. But the thing is, those power supplies weren't actually the right ones. Like, I remember seeing like RTX 3080 bundles where it was like an RTX 3080 bundled with like a 500 watt power supply from some random no-name. Like, what am I going to do with this power supply? How am I going to use this? It's like, I'm never going to use this power supply. So it's like, why do I have to pay for it? So obviously someone's trying to clear out inventory of stock that's just stale. Yeah, but you know what? They have the new RAM from Corsair. Like, Newegg has the, look at this, check this out. 96 gigabytes. 96 gigabytes. That's 248 gig DIMMs. Now, just by looking at this, it's going to be Micron memory because of those timings. 40, 40, 40, 77. It could be Samsung, but most likely this is Micron. Yeah, 1.25, 40, 40. This is Micron, which is not bad. So the other thing, too, that I found out recently is AMD's X670. I don't know. I haven't looked at B650. But AMD motherboards, at least the Gigabyte one, now supports DDR5 40 gigabyte and 24 gigabyte high capacity DIMMs. So, like I said in a previous stream, you know, I knew that AMD motherboards would gain support for the higher capacity DIMMs. So I may have to revisit memory again in the future. Hey, it's Mike. Hey, Mike. But here we are with the really big... So basically, like, somebody could get a RAM stick, like, or a RAM kit like this, and they could put this in that cheap $100 motherboard and max out. Although, I don't know how practical that is, because if you're going to spend this much money on RAM, it's like, you might as well just get a better motherboard that has more features and more USB ports and stuff like that. But I'm just saying, like, this is going to be, like, the maximum amount of RAM that you could fit on one of these super budget, like, $100 motherboards for AM5. Don't expect to be able to overclock this stuff, though. It's super high density, and it's Micron, so that's probably what's going to kill any kind of overclockability on this. But hey, 5600 megahertz isn't terrible. It's like this is the one standard speed down from 6000. So that's pretty interesting. Yeah, right now I feel like Corsair is the only one that has the really big, dense DIMMs. 96. I guess the most affordable one is this one. The non-RGB. The non-RGB also has slightly better... oh, but it's slower. It's 5200. I think it's going to be fun. Oh, yeah. Well, the standard one, yeah. The thing is, like, I have a feeling that a lot of people that are going to consider an A620 motherboard are probably going to pair it up with a 7800X 3D. Maybe a 7700X. But I think the VRM is going to be fine. Like, I remember Buildzoid was saying that the VRM... all the VRMs on even the most budget-friendly motherboards can handle even, like, the 7950X, for instance. So I don't know if it's that big of a deal. Like, I wouldn't worry about the VRM on an AMD motherboard. I feel like all the AMD motherboards, except for, I guess, the Ryzen 9 CPUs, the non-3DX CPUs, like the 7900X and the 7950X, those are the only two that really kind of push the limit on the power consumption. And even then, they're still not... they're not anywhere close to maxing out the VRM on most of the motherboards. Even like the budget motherboards, like the B650 motherboards. So I wouldn't worry about it. I think this will be able to handle like a 7950X just fine. So but it's weird though. It's like, okay, $100 for the motherboard, but then it's like $300 for the 96 gigabytes of RAM. And then realistically, the best CPU for this would be like the 7800X 3D, because that's like that's a lower power CPU, but it has very, very good gaming performance. It's like top tier gaming performance. And with the two DIMM, like you could even just go with like 32 gigabytes of 6400 megahertz RAM if you didn't want the density or didn't need the density. But I don't know. I still think like I said, guys, I'll take 64 gigabytes 5600 over 32 gigabytes 6000 or 6400 any day of the week. That's why I'm now considering 96 gigabytes on 2 sticks. But I would end up buying like the 5600 one. So like this one. Yeah, but this one is, wait, what's this? This is 404040. What's this one? These are the same latency. Wait, so why does the RGB one cost less than the non-RGB? They have the same latency, same timings, same speed, same capacity. But the RGB is cheaper than the non-RGB. Here's 192 gigabytes of RAM. 192 gigabytes of RAM. That's what I want right there. I want 192 gigabytes of RAM. Realistically, no, I don't. I actually just want 96. Because I know with 96, you get the potential for higher speed than like four DIMMs. That's why I think 96 is the way to go. Over like 4 sticks at 128. But we're pretty close to the launch. It's like a week away. And then what's funny is the RTX 4070 launches like 2 weeks from today. So that reminds me, RTX 3070 Ti. Like, how much does this cost? Sold by Newegg. They're still over MSRP. Now, granted, these are... Well, this one's below MSRP, the Zotac one. And there's only like 3 choices now. There's Asus, Gigabyte, and Zotac. And of these 3, only the Zotac is under MSRP. So, this means that when the 4070 launches, expect the cards to cost like this kind of money. I don't know. I don't think so. I think it's just going to launch partner only. I think it's going to be like the 4070 Ti. So how much is the 3070? So MSRP of this is 500. So again, okay, that's a Ti. So again, they always go for like over MSRP. Yeah, these are totally not worth it. RIP anyone who paid like this kind of money for this. I don't care that there's a knocked out cooler on there. That's totally not worth that kind of money. Like, that's ridiculous. Yeah, the AMD ones are the only ones that are... Yeah, that's crazy. The XT, so that's... See, that again, that's like saying... That's like saying 3080 for 3070 money, but with more RAM, like double the RAM over this thing. Like, yeah, wow. 539? 539. This is basically the same as like the one Black Friday deal for the same card. I think with the promo, I think the promo for Black Friday made, if I remember correctly, it was $535 during Black Friday. So it's all this deal is almost as good as the Black Friday deal. Same exact graphics card too, because that's exactly the same brand. It was the Phantom Gaming. What's this? Oh, Gigabyte. See, like, this is basically the same price, the same kind of price range as the RTX 3070. Like the 3070 non-TI. The one that has an MSRP of $500 is going for like above MSRP after like 2 years. No, I think it'll be a little bit better than that. I think so. The way I expect the 7800 XT to perform about the same as a 6950 XT, priced at $699. Like I said this in a previous live stream. So the 7800 XT is going to be very similar to this card in terms of performance. This is my guess. And I think it's going to have the exact same MSRP. So my guess, my prediction for the 7800 XT is that it will cost $699. It will come with 16 gigabytes of memory, just like the 6950 XT. And it will perform basically identical to the 6950 XT. The only thing that will be better is the RT performance. The RT performance on the RDNA 3 card will be better than the RDNA 2 card. And that's really the only thing. Probably the power consumption will be a little bit less. If I had to guess, it'll probably be a little bit more energy efficient. But I think that's what they're going to do. 60 compute units. Yeah, but I still think, like, but see, that's like how the newer NVIDIA card with the 192-bit bus is still going to be equal or better than the 256-bit bus Ampere card. So it's the same story with the AMD stuff. Because remember how the RX 480 was basically the same or slightly better than a 390X. And a 390X was a 512 gigabit memory bus. Or 512, did I say gigabit? 512-bit memory bus. So, like, that's the thing. So let's go to the GPU database. RX 480. So the RX 480 was a 256-bit bus card with 8 gigs of memory with 32 ROPs and 2,304 cores. So this thing, look, there it is. It is almost the same. It's funny how it's like 2% faster than the 780 Ti. But like, okay, this is a 512-bit bus card with more cores, 2,816 versus 2,300 roughly on this guy. But this guy's still like, what, 2% faster or whatever? So, and it's like half the electricity. This was like 150 watts. This thing was like 300 watts. So yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, even with the 60 compute units, the 7800 XT is still going to be the same as a 6950 XT. Like, I have a feeling that AMD's literally just going to launch the 7800 XT once the stock of this thing, like, really starts drying up. Because you have to remember, AMD launched this card last year. Like, this card isn't even a year old yet. The 6950 XT was, what? Like, May? 6950 XT. May of 2022. So, it's not even a year old. Even though the architecture is already kind of old, like 2 years old at this point, or more than 2 years old. So but the thing is, I have a feeling that AMD's replacement to this card is literally the 7800 XT at the exact same price point. Like, the starting price of that new card will be the clearance price of this card. And it'll have the exact same amount of memory, if I had to guess. Because, think about it, it would slot right in underneath the 7900 XT. Because that's exactly where this card falls. Meaning it would be basically the same as the RTX 4070 Ti. The 7800 XT will be equal in performance, roughly, to the 4070 Ti, while costing $100 less and featuring 4 gigabytes more memory. It would be possible to manipulate the bus width and put like... And see, I feel like if AMD does that, that's going to make them look kind of good. Like, I kind of see the 7800 XT potentially being the hero of the enthusiast market if AMD follows through on all of my predictions. $4070 has 32 less ROPs than that did. Yeah, it would be possible to manipulate the bus width to put like 18 gigs of VRAM. I don't know. That's more of a question for MetPrism. I'm not sure. Like I know there's a way to predict the memory amount based off of the bus width for the memory. I don't really know offhand how to do that though. I guess they could do that, but I don't know if they're going to do that. 18 gigs of VRAM just seems like a really weird number. But I kind of think that $700, 16 gigs of RAM, 4070 Ti performance, I think that's going to be kind of a win for AMD. Because think about it like this. So like Nvidia was smart in that they basically placed the 4070 Ti. They basically put the 4070 Ti right underneath the 7900 XT based off of rasterization performance. Meaning Nvidia didn't try to like stupidly price the 4070 Ti at $900 because it would look really dumb because it's a 70 numbered card at almost $1,000. That would make no sense at all. But they just kind of placed it right under the AMD card at $100 less. But it still looks like bad value. Oh, you would need a bus width of 288 since it's 32 bits per memory module on the PCB. What's the 9 number for? Why are you multiplying it by 9? 32 times 9. Oh, are you doing... Oh, you found the number 9? Because it's... You took... I'm confused. Why do you use the number 9? That's the only thing I don't know, and maybe that's why I can't accurately predict like the bus width on GPUs, because I don't know how to determine that. I always guess off of historical numbers. 9 is the number of 2 gigabyte memory modules you would need for... Oh, I see. Okay. Okay, you're talking about like 2 gigs is 1 square. 2 gigs of memory is basically one of the squares of RAM that goes on the PCB. I get you now. Okay, that makes sense. Hey, Hades. You think the 7700 XT is going to cost $500? I don't think so, because It kind of depends. If there's a 7800 non-XT, just like how there's a there's like a 6800. Like if there's one of these, I don't think so. I think the 7800 non-XT would be like 600. Or no, more like 549. I think 549 is my guess for like a 7800. The 7800 XT I still think is going to be 699. And then the 7700 XT would be more like 480. So I think I did it on a previous stream. I can do it again. These are my price predictions for the AMD cards, for those wondering. So we already know this thing is 1,000. So this is 900. This was the MSRP, but realistically, this thing's already kind of discounted for like 850 or even 800 in some extreme cases. So I think this is gonna be 700. If there is a like a non-XT, I think this is gonna be 550. And then I think the 7700 XT would be like 480. Around these, this is kind of my estimate. And then, like if they wanted, they could make this one 580 or 600 or something like that. Or they could make this 649. I mean, I could see, so I'll give you guys a range. 649 to 699 is kind of the range, if I had to guess. And then this one, the range would be like 549 to 579 or maybe 599 at most. I could see them doing that. And then this one is like really, realistically, I think this one's going to be like probably 449 to 479. Like, I know this is a small range, but historically, AMD prices these cards in this range a lot. Like, the lowest they would do would be like $399, but I don't really see them going that low. Maybe $429 if we wanted to make this a wider range. $7,700. If this ends up being a thing, I don't know. This might come later, so I'm just gonna like ignore it. And then this one would be like $349 or somewhere around there. Oh, if you guys want to know the equivalent like from the old AMD cards, so this one is like, this is kind of like 6950 XT, roughly. So that means this one would be like 6800 XT. And then this one would be probably like 6800. And then, so it's basically like one, it kind of drops like every tier, right? Like as you get lower down the stack, it's harder to predict. Like this one I'm just going to leave out. I'm just going to omit this one for now. And just leave it like that. And then this guy would be kind of like 6700. Or this would be like 6750 XT or something like that. Or, well, yeah, something like that. So if you notice though, when you look at this, notice that nothing really changes. Nothing really changes, right? Like the only difference, so the prices for AMD's cards, they don't really change. Because if you look at the price, the original price of the 6900 XT price was the same. Like this thing had the exact same MSRP of the current flagship, meaning AMD didn't really change their pricing structure. So at the top end. So I don't expect them to change their price structure for the entire lineup, for the most part. So, and the fact that this card was so ill-received, that's the reason why this is kind of the outlier. Like, this really should have been $799. Like, it should have been in that range. Like, this was the original kind of, like, expected range. And AMD obviously opted to go all in on the high number. And it really didn't... It kind of backfired on them. So this is why I'm giving you guys this range. Because the sad reality is that when you look at this, the performance of this is roughly going to be like this, but the price is going to be kind of like the clearance price of the current outgoing model. So meaning nothing is really changing. The narrative doesn't change. The prices that you see for the current clearance price of the RDNA 2 GPUs is basically the same price for the newer cards that are supposed to fall into that tier at their starting MSRP. So there's nothing really to get excited about when it comes to the rest of AMD's RDNA 3 lineup. Like, the price structure doesn't really change for the performance you get. The only thing that you get that's an improvement is the ray tracing performance. If you care about ray tracing, the RDNA 3 GPUs will have better RT performance at the same price of the outgoing model while maintaining, you know, like that same level of rasterization at that price point. So really nothing crazy. I mean, I guess on the plus side, it's better than NVIDIA because NVIDIA's kind of gimping. Like, they're doing like 192-bit bus GPUs and trying to charge like $600 or $800 for those GPUs. And you know, they tend to skimp on like less VRAM and that kind of stuff. So I just feel like NVIDIA is just kind of bad news all around if you start looking at the lower, more affordable options. But then AMD, it's not really that much better. It's like, okay, you get more for your money with AMD, but like, if you were to buy a clearance 6800 XT today at Newegg, you know, like, you're kind of getting a good deal. It's like waiting around for the 7800 or the 7800 XT isn't really going to net you much in terms of improvement. The only thing that you'll get, there's two things. There's two things I want to point out. The advantage of waiting for RDNA 3 for any of these price points is you get two things. You get better RT performance, and this is probably a bigger selling point, at least in my opinion, but a lot of people may not care about this. You get AV1 encoding. You will get AV1 encoding. And I've been meaning to test AV1 streaming to YouTube because YouTube recently opened up the beta to allow content creators to stream to YouTube in AV1. So I can do that with my 7900 XTX. So that is kind of like the two key things. And I guess the third one would be, you know, lower power consumption. Like, this would be the third bullet point in terms of the 1, 2, 3. Like, what do I actually get by waiting for RDNA 3 versus RDNA 2? Like, these are the three things. Better RT, but again, it's like nothing to write home about because it's nothing really that amazing because you're essentially getting NVIDIA RTX 30 series. You're getting like last gen NVIDIA RT performance with the RDNA 3 GPUs. So it's like, yeah, it's cool, it's good, but it's not like amazing. Right? So it's, and especially at these lower range GPUs, I feel like RT performance in this price point matters way less than it does at like the upper end of the market. So it's just something to point out. Oh yeah, the DisplayPort. Yeah. That's okay. That's worth mentioning. So DP 2.1. Yeah. You get the DisplayPort 2.1, I guess. If you have a monitor that can actually support that, you know, but that's gonna be like 8K, and realistically, if you're trying to play games, that's not really feasible. So I don't know, like it's a nice gimmick to have, but it's I don't know, it's nice, but it's not like a deal breaker. Yeah, that's the thing about ray tracing though. Like ray tracing is so demanding. Even on the 40 series GPUs, it's still really, really demanding. Like look at Cyberpunk for example. So it's like I don't know. It's still not there yet. We're still not there where RT, like buying a GPU solely on RT performance is not really. I don't consider that like the most important priority. Of course, it depends on the type of games you play. But, like, you guys know me, I don't really play a lot of RT titles anyway, so it's like, I don't really care. I'm just waiting for games that were developed originally with RT as, like, the baseline to come out. Then RT will actually matter. But the way it is today, RT, in my mind, is still a bolt-on. It's like it's an add-on. Nice to have, but it's like call me later when it's actually like relevant. Yeah, it's gonna be like Ampere. It's gonna be like Ampere's RT performance. So, I mean, these prices make sense because, like, where's Nvidia's cards right now? Right? Like, Nvidia, what's the Nvidia one here? 4070 Ti. 4070 Ti is basically 7800 XT, but it's way more money. And it's less RAM. So that means 4070 is going to land like right here. And look at the MSRP. $600. 4070. That's a logical guess. And then what do we have down here? 4060 Ti. 4060 Ti is going to be like right around there. And then finally, 4060 is down here. So at the end of the day, just by looking at the AMD projection or estimates for the price and the performance, the Nvidia cards logically slot right in next to them without even knowing the official numbers. But we kind of already know the 4070's numbers. So there you go. And remember, MetPrism was saying that 4070 is going to be like 3080. That is an accurate statement because look at what I'm predicting. 4070 is going to be in this price range, probably a little bit more than this. And look what it matches up with. 6800 XT. What is the 6800 XT the rival to? RTX 3080. There you go. There's the answer. It all makes sense. The truth is revealed. Secrets revealed. 4060 is apparently going to back to then. Yeah, it's gonna have to. It's gonna have to because so the 12 gig. It's easy to predict, right? Because 4070 Ti is 12 gig. 4070 is 12 gig. 4060 Ti is going to be 8 gig. 4060 is going to be 8 gig. So it makes total sense, and I don't fault Nvidia on doing that because they went and started, you know, here anyway. It's like if you want 16 gigabytes on an Nvidia graphics card, you have to pay at least $1,200. So it's like you have to pay at least $1,200 if you want 16 gigabytes of RAM. If you want the amount of RAM on a NVIDIA card to match the amount of RAM on a $350 Intel Arc A770, you have to pay $1,200. You literally have to pay $900 more than the Intel A770 if you want the same amount of RAM on an NVIDIA graphics card. You know what I call that? Stingy. That's just straight up, like, I don't know, like, they're really wanting you to pay up for that RAM. Intel's basically giving it away for free, and AMD is just selling it to you at the standard rate. NVIDIA's charging a premium for their VRAM. I don't care if it's GDDR6X, because guess who makes GDDR6X? Micron. So I could care less about GDDR6X. The 4060 Ti is going to be 128 gig bus. That is such a facepalm statement. There was rumors of the 4050 having 6 gigabytes. Hey, at least it's not 4. Because I was thinking it was going to be 4 myself. I'm pretty sure the 4050 mobile is going to be 4 gigabytes. Thing is, we know all the secrets. Basically, we know all the secrets of the pricing and the performance tier because of RDNA 2. You know what the giveaway is? RDNA 2 clearance pricing. Pricing reveals all the secrets. RDNA 2 clearance pricing reveals all the secrets of the new GPUs. From these prices, I'm able to accurately predict the price range of all the new upcoming AMD cards. And from that, I can also derive all the NVIDIA cards' performance tiers. Well, they'll line up relative to each other. So from this, we already know like how a 4070 will stack up to an NVIDIA 30 series. Basically, 4070 equals 3080. 4060 Ti equals 3070. 4060 is going to be like a tiny bit faster than or a little bit faster, I guess at best, than a 3060 Ti. So they all line up perfectly. Desktop 4050 equals laptop 4050 with higher clock speed. Oh, really? Okay, it's all gonna be. The rumor is it's 6 gigabytes. That's actually not terrible though. Like, realistically, 6 gigabytes of VRAM on a laptop GPU, in my mind, that's okay. Like, ideally, 8 is better, but 6 is good because, in my mind, like, if I'm talking about a laptop. Now, granted, you guys have already heard my rant about what my opinion is on gaming laptops. I think they're a complete garbage waste of money, and it's a huge, stupid meme. Like, anyone who's buying a gaming laptop really is doing themselves a disservice, and they should just buy a really nice, like, workstation laptop instead, for the same amount of money. But, like, if I was gonna game on a laptop, first of all, it would be no higher than 1080p resolution, because if you're going to be using a 15-inch tiny little screen, like 4K is a complete joke at that size of a screen. 1440p is also complete garbage at that small of a screen. So that literally means like 1080p is the be-all, end-all of laptop gaming. And at 1080p, 6 gigabytes of VRAM is still okay. But yeah, 8 would be nice to have, though. Yeah, Raja left Intel a while ago. Well, no, he left the end of the month. So yeah, Raja left Intel like tomorrow. Raja's last day at Intel is technically tomorrow, guys. He leaves end of the month. Tomorrow's the last day of the month. No, they announced his resignation, or they announced him like his leave like 2 weeks or like a week and a half ago or whatever. So yeah, but yeah, he's leaving. He's gonna go do like software. He's gonna do like a startup in some kind of software, AI, whatever, or graphics, whatever he's gonna do. Like, I don't know. I want to say a couple things about Raja Koduri. Like, a lot of people have a negative opinion of him, and I don't think that's fair. I don't think that's right, because I've been hearing a lot of people say that Raja, like, anywhere he went, like, that company suffered. I don't agree with that statement at all. Like, people who spout nonsense like that, they have no idea what they're talking about. They don't have, like, half the skills that what Raja has, what it takes to make a GPU, first of all. But, like, the argument in favor of those people who say that Raja basically ruins everything are they're citing the fact that when Raja was at AMD, AMD struggled to have anything competitive with NVIDIA. And then when Raja left AMD and went to Intel, after Raja left, AMD launched 5700 XT. Then they went on to launch RDNA 2. Then here we are with RDNA 3. Meaning, after Raja left, AMD became more powerful. Basically, the story that I heard was like, AMD used to be like, well, no, that doesn't make any sense. Because that doesn't make any sense. Like, somebody was trying to argue, like, Raja, so AMD was Majin Buu when he absorbed, like, Gotenks and Gohan, and he was, like, Gohan Buu or whatever. But then, like, when AMD, like, expelled Raja, that was basically, like, AMD turning into Kid Buu, and that purified AMD and made them more powerful so that they could, like, release awesome things like the 6950 XT, for example. So, whereas when Raja was there, he was actually, like, weakening them, so the power level was lower. You know, like the Majin Buu analogy. But that, to me, sounds like complete nonsense. So, people say it's true, but it's like, I don't think people realized that RDNA 2 was a thing that was in development while Raja was still at AMD. Like, he didn't leave, and then they're like, okay, guys, let's make RDNA 2 because he's gone now. Like, that's not what happened. I'm pretty sure that is not what happened. So, he kind of laid the groundwork for that stuff, but he didn't stick around long enough to see those things become a reality in the market. So then he goes to Intel, right? So what does he do for like 5 years at Intel? They make the ARC stuff. And they set the roadmap for the data center GPUs. So is that a complete failure? I don't think so. Like, think about how hard it would be to... So, okay, the argument in favor of Raja is like, if Raja never went to Intel, would there be an Intel ARC today? Probably not. Most likely there wouldn't be. Intel would still... So Intel would be left with what? Intel would have 13th gen. Okay. Whatever. And then, like, their Sapphire Rapids, which is basically Alder Lake. Like, that's literally all they would have. Plus their networking division. So, like, you know, the Intel NIC, the 2.5 gig LAN that's in all the AMD motherboards. You know, all that kind of stuff would be what Intel has. Plus all their embedded, like, Internet of Things and whatever chipsets, the stuff that they have. Ponte Vecchio. Yeah, okay. Yeah, all that stuff. So it's like, they would still just be the same old company that they've always been. Nothing new, nothing exciting. So, I don't agree with that at all. I think Raja, like, a lot of people give him flack for, like, I don't know. It's like the products that launched while he was there never lived up to the hype, right? So, case in point, Vega 64. uh, the RX 480. The RX 480 was a good product, but it was like not an enthusiast product. So he never like. I guess Vega 64 was like the best thing, and then he left, and then Radeon 7 was already kind of there, but like he left and they launched it anyway, like 2 months after he was gone, and it was never really that good. So you know, like then after that, like in that same year, 6 months or 7 months later after he had left, they go and launch 5700 XT. Now I can guarantee you that Raja did a lot of work on 5700 XT, aka Navi first gen, because there's no way that a guy leaves a company and then 6 or 7 months later they launch a RNA 1 5700 XT, like out of the blue, like with nothing. Okay, 6 months later, and now we have like a new architecture. I can guarantee you, like, he had a big say in how that played out. So with him leaving Intel, though, I have no idea like what Intel's gonna do. Tom Peterson is nice, but Tom Peterson is more of a sales guy, though. It's like Tom Peterson has patents and he did a lot of dev work, but remember, a lot of what he does today, and this is true for Raja as well, like a lot of what they do is more of like a management role as opposed to an actual engineering development role. Tom Peterson could replace him. I mean, I guess, but I guess, like, I don't really know how much dev work he does, like or has done in like a long time, because he's more of like a marketing guy now. I don't think a lot of people understand, like, when somebody moves to upper management, they don't really do much of the development work. So that means that they're not really the right person to fix a problem. Like, okay, the executives, yes, they are the person that's supposed to fix the issues, but if the problem is at its core a lack of, like, engineering to improve the performance, you still kind of need the right resources to do that. Steve Ballmer for the win. Do we need to watch the Steve Ballmer goes crazy on stage video? Steve Ballmer? Isn't that guy retired? Like, he was CEO of Microsoft for a long time. I remember, like, for some reason, people seem to keep, like, when Steve Ballmer was the CEO of Microsoft, so many people still thought that Bill Gates was the CEO of Microsoft, even though Bill Gates had not been the CEO of Microsoft for, like, 5 or 6 years at the time. Oh, developers. 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 That video? I'm not talking about that video. I'm talking about the cheer for me. Yeah, the one where he's like all screaming and rowdy and like jumping and galloping on stage like a madman. I'm talking about that video. Because that video back in the day, that was kind of like the equivalent of the El Recitas. El Recitas videos. Yeah, no, it's an old video from like 2007 or something. I don't know, like maybe we can watch it. I don't know if, let me see. It might have copyrighted music in it though. Steve Ballmer going crazy. This video, I think it has music. Hold on, let me... Oh yeah, it does have music. It's got music in it, so I don't really know if I want to play it. It's hilarious though. Well, it's hold on, let me skip. Is the music? Oh, it's got music like the whole video? Oh, I can't play it. Basically, just search Steve Ballmer runs around like a maniac on stage. This video, here, I'll mute it. It's gonna look really weird watching this with it muted. There's music though. I don't want to get like copyrighted or whatever, or like demonetized or whatever because of the music. Yeah, this is the video. Like, not the developer's video gets really annoying after a while. This is supposed to be a motivational speech. Steve Ballmer runs around like a maniac on stage. There's also the developer's one, but I don't like that video because it's lame. This man walked on the stage like he won the lottery. Man, yeah, I remember this video. Like, he's literally yelling at the crowd. He's telling them to cheer for him. He's like, "Give it up for me, cheer for me." and then, like, at that point, I think if I remember correctly, when he says this, like when he gets up to the podium, right here. It's such an old video, it's all pixelated. He, like, literally here, he's saying, "Who said sit down?" Because someone yelled, "Sit down," or something like that at him. It's like, "Who said sit down?" He was CEO in some dark times. The 360... The 360 3RL cost $1 billion. Oh, the Red Ring of Death? You mean the Red Ring of Death? Yeah, when was the... I mean, this video, it says 10... No, this video was way older than, like, 2012. I think the original one was, like, 2007 or 8. Yeah, it was during the time when the 360 was, like... When the Xbox 360 had all those Red Ring of Deaths. Yeah, he was the CEO when that was going on. And a lot of people never knew that he was a CEO. Everyone just assumed that Bill Gates was the CEO of Microsoft, even though Bill Gates had stepped down from, like, for a long time. Like, he hadn't been the CEO for a very long time. Man, I can just imagine, like, with all the deep fakes, people are probably gonna make, like, deep fake videos with this guy at some point. Like those ones with those ones with like the presidents and the former presidents playing like Elden Ring or some nonsense, or arguing about the Pokemon tier list or whatever. Like those type of videos, those deepfake videos. Anyway, yeah, this guy though, like, yeah, jumping around. That's hilarious. Some people still think Bill Gates still manages the company. You know, I wouldn't be surprised if the people that thought Bill Gates still manages Microsoft still thought that Steve Jobs was alive. Those same people probably still think that Steve Jobs is still alive, and he's still at Apple after more than a decade of being deceased. That's how you can tell if somebody reaches immortality. I guess like people might not be able to really live forever, but some people can become so famous that they basically achieve immortality. Because I remember that was a weird time. Like 2009 through 2000. I think Steve Jobs died in 2011, if I'm not mistaken. I just remember like that was the time when like I think like Michael Jackson died like a year before that or something like that. And then Steve Jobs died, and I think a bunch of like famous people died around the same time. Yeah. Steve Jobs presentations are still really famous. I remember like he gave like a motivational speech at a graduation for I think like Stanford University or something. That's probably the most memorable speech that I remember him giving. I think that was like on a YouTube video. Yeah, but Steve Jobs was not a really like Steve Jobs was not a very nice person though. Like the people who knew him, he wasn't he wasn't a good person. Like he's not like a criminal or anything, but he was not like a he was just kind of a he was definitely an overachiever, but he I don't know, like the people around him, people in his inner circle and stuff, there was a whole like Steve Jobs biography movie or something that released like a few years after he died, if I remember correctly. I remember seeing it, and the impression I got was that's a really interesting movie to watch, like how the upper levels of a company, like how the executives at a company behave and why they make the decisions they do sometimes when it comes to like laying off employees or choosing who should be CEO and that kind of stuff. It was a very interesting film. Steve Wozniak is apparently a good guy though. Yeah, he was the brains. He was the brains. Jobs was the visionary. Wozniak was like the guy that made it all happen. Wozniak was the engineer. Jobs was kind of like the business guy. Although Jobs was like he did have a programming job. Like he did work. He did work as a game developer for a while for like Atari. But I don't know. I don't know how accurate some of the events are in the movie. But like I think Steve like was working on a game and he didn't really know how to make it the way he wanted, but then like he asked Wozniak to help him. Wozniak didn't even work for Atari at the time, and like Wozniak's the one that actually made, I think it was like Breakout or Pong or something. Like it was some game back in like the 1970s or early 80s or something. I forget. No, it must have been the 70s. Because I think Apple founded in the late 70s? I think so. Wozniak is so cool, he prints his own money. Okay, well, I mean, at this point, the only other thing I was going to mention, well, we talked about it briefly, was the first Unreal Engine 5 game, but it's going to be Tekken 5, I think. I'm pretty sure it's going to be Tekken 5. There's a new 3D Mark. So 3D Mark AMD FSR2 feature tests let you compare the performance and visuals powered by FSR 2.2. That's interesting. It's just something that I just noticed. But Tekken 8 is going to be the first game. I don't know if anybody here in the chat, like if you guys or anybody watching, like if you're a fan of fighting games, that genre, I don't know, like that genre kind of goes through ebbs and flows in terms of popularity. Like I feel like every 5-ish years, isn't Fortnite the first UE5 game? Is Fortnite really UE5 native though? Did they really redo the whole? No, I don't think so. Is Fortnite UE5? I'm talking about the first like ground up game that was made in UE5 from the start. Fortnite at best is like a ported game. Like they ported it into UE5. So I don't really count Fortnite. Even if it is UE5 today, like I don't consider Fortnite the first UE5 game. Because it's not natively, it wasn't made originally in UE5. I think Tekken 8 is going to be the first one that was developed 100% in UE5 from the start. So actually, let me see, like, Senua's Hellblade 2 is going to be UE5. Yeah, so Fortnite moved to UE5 in the middle of last year. But that's not really like new though. Street Fighter and Tekken carry the fighting scene, at least for the casual public. I can see that. Gears of War. I'm just looking at like is this for real? Hold on, let me. Here. So this article, Senua's Saga Hellblade 2, the sequel to Ninja Theory's dark fantasy action adventure game, is set in Iceland and sees the heroine make a return after succeeding in her battle against her inner demons. Fortnite, so here it is, but it says it moved back in mid of 2022. ArcAge 2, this game could be really good as an MMO, but the thing is, ArcAge 1 had whoever was in control, like what the not the publisher, but like the management company for ArcAge, it got shuffled around from different server providers multiple times, at least in the West, and that just kind of ruined it. Dragon Quest 12, The Flames of Fate. Apparently, this is going to be UE5. I didn't know that. Dreamhouse, the game. eFootball PES 2022 or 2022. Gears of War. Is that really going to be UE5? The developer of the Coalition has confirmed that new... Okay, but we don't know when that's going to come out. Echoes of the End. I don't know what that is. I've never heard of this before. Developed by Icelandic studio Mykur Games. It follows Ren, an experienced fighter capable of manipulating and destroying matter. That sounds very interesting. Stalker 2, Heart of Chernobyl. Black Myth Wukong. Quantum Error. A new Bioshock game. Apparently there's a new one. Although I don't know if that's true. An announcement. Okay. Ashes of Creation. That's... Who knows when that's coming out. Mortal Online 2. Ill. Layers of Fears. Grasshopper Manufacturer Games. Like, okay, I don't know how true a lot of this is. Oh, it does say in an interview with Automation Media, it has confirmed that it is currently in the pre-production stage working in UE5. A new Witcher game. Hopefully that doesn't disappoint because, you know, Cyberpunk 2077 was a huge disappointment. A new Tomb Raider game? Is that for real? Fire Sprite, whatever that is. Kingdom Hearts 4. Okay, that's a long time from now. Hell is Us, Off the Grid. Where's Tekken 8? Like, what are all these random things I've never heard of? Arc 2, Instinction, Into the Echo, Legend of Yimmer. What is all this stuff? Like, apparently there's a lot of games. Okay, apparently there's a lot of games. Aliens, ArenaNet, like what is that? Guild Wars 3? Nightingale, the first. I don't know what any of these things are. Where is Tekken? There it is. Tekken 8. I think this is going to be the first one because this is the only one that I'm seeing trailers for almost every other day. What was the last time you heard something about King of Fighters? Like, I'm seeing trailers for Tekken 8 like every few days. I'm getting notifications in my YouTube feed of recommended videos, it's always a trailer for a new Tekken 8 character reveal. So that might just be me, but like that's the reason why I think Tekken 8 is going to be the first true native UE5 game. Because this game should probably come out around, like if I had to guess, in Q3 of this year. So from July through September is when I expect Tekken 8 to show up. Which is perfect timing because it'll be like right after Final Fantasy 16. And then, okay, so that's whatever this stuff is. So, games built on undisclosed version of Hogwarts Legacy is listed. So, yeah, I don't know. How old is this article? February of this year? But Hogwarts Legacy isn't even that. Whatever. Anyway, I still think Tekken 8 is going to be the first one. Mortal Online 2 already released. What is that? Is that even good? Mortal Online 2 is a first-person MMO that caters to a more hardcore audience. Its open world being subjected to full PvP rules. The title will make the jump to Unreal Engine 5 when a stable enough build becomes available. So it's not UE5 today. It's probably a bad MMO. Avowed. The only ones that I knew of, just looking through this list, like, I'll just point out the ones. So, Black Myth Wukong. But isn't this like a Chinese development studio or whatever? Like, that's gonna take forever. And then Ashes of Creation. This is the game that a lot of people are hyping up big time. I'll believe it when I see it, though. I don't know what this is. It sounds interesting, though. This Layers of Fears. The Grasshopper Manufacturer game. I mean, these guys... When was the last time these guys actually made a game? Like, PS3 era? The Witcher, again, I'll believe it when I see it. Like, it's so far away from now that, yeah. The Tomb Raider game, I don't really know if this is for real. Has anybody confirmed that it's next year? Okay, so they are really working on it. But again, you know, this is probably like 2026 or some super long time from now. Kingdom Hearts 4, again, you know, this is probably going to be like 2025 at the earliest. Hell Is Us, I've never heard of that. Off the Grid, I have no idea what that is. The Day Before, no, whatever. Stormgate, Fort, whatever. Arc 2, Instinction, Into the Echo, Legend of Ymir. This sounds like what, an MMO? An MMO, of course. With NFTs. Yay. Okay. Project Ryu. Yeah, so what, like all this stuff, I don't know what any of these things are. Like, single player game set in Korea. This looks like some kind of scary game. Rooted. Shadow of Conspiracy Section 2. Well, okay. The cool thing is, even though I don't recognize like 90% of this list, at least it's not a bunch of rehashes and sequels of existing franchises. So I guess that's a good thing. But maybe it's because all those existing franchises use engines other than UE5 and they don't care about UE5. So maybe that's the flip side of that. So the only one's like Tekken 8, because Tekken 7 was UE4, and then all the other Tekken games before 7 were all like Namco's own in-house engine. The Tomb Raider devs partnered with Amazon Games. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I'm not really that impressed with Amazon's games. Like, Amazon's first-party game, New World, to me was a big disappointment. And then, the other games that Amazon Games has released, they didn't even make. They're just publishing, like, a game made in Asia, and they're just, like, you know, publishing it in the Western market. So, it's like, does that even count? Not in my mind. Tomb Raider MMO coming soon. That's gonna fail. I don't see how that would... I know you're joking, or at least I hope you're joking. But it's like, that sounds like such a terrible idea. A Tomb Raider MMO. So anyway. Yeah, we'll see. Like, I'm a big fan of the Tekken series. I think I said that on another stream. But I know, like, I'll be playing a lot of Tekken 8 when it launches. If it comes out this year. I hope it does. Maybe it will surprise us. The announcement of a new BioShock game sounds cool. Like, I remember I liked BioShock Infinite. And I'm not someone who likes first-person shooters, but BioShock Infinite was a very interesting game. I liked BioShock Infinite more than all the other BioShock games. Definitely my favorite one in the series. The only other, like, well, the other shooter game, single-player shooter that I enjoyed playing was a game called Vanquish, but that's not really a first-person shooter. It's more like a over-the-shoulder shooter, and it was made by Sega, so it's like a Japanese first-person or third-person shooter, but it was like a single-player game. I thought that game was pretty cool, and that was a shooter. And I'm not a big fan of like shooter games. Like, that's probably one of my least favorite genres of games. Yeah, Vanquish was pretty cool. Platinum Games? Was it? I think you might be right. Yeah, you're right. It was. Platinum Games. Why is it showing like a Bayonetta trailer though? Like, what is this? Oh wait, what? That's the guy from I think this is just a trailer for Platinum Games. But yeah, Vanquish. It's on Steam. I like the slide, like the sliding. Just the overall speed. It just seemed really over the top. It was cool. Vanquish was a cool game. That would be a cool one to see, like a remaster. Well, I don't really think it needs a remaster, because it didn't really look that bad. I mean, it was from what? Oh, it's old, though. 2010? Wow. It's a pretty good one, though. I'm not a big fan of, like, first-person shooters or just shooter games in general, but that's a good one. Like, the other one that I remember playing, like, Unreal Championship 2, the Leandry conflict. Like, this game on the original Xbox. So, remember, guys, when I mentioned I kind of want an Xbox Series X, not because of Xbox Series X games, but because of, like, the being able to play the old school games via emulation, via backwards compatibility. Most of the games that I want to replay are Xbox original games. So, like, Unreal Championship 2, the Leandry conflict. This game was probably one of my favorite shooters from way back. Yeah, okay, Xbox 360. Oh, I guess it got like a digital release in 2019. I have to look into that. But anyway, that's kind of why I would get one, is to replay like old games that are really hard to find now. But anyway, that's pretty much all I had for this stream. This game runs on Xbox Series though. I think it does. You kind of got a remaster for PC and Xbox One. Oh, yeah, yeah. Yeah. A lot of the games that I want to play on Xbox Series X are actually just, upscaled, whatever, like emulated, whatever you want to call it, like backwards compatibility of old games. That's really, like, my main thing when it comes to Xbox, is I don't want to play, like, the old games again. Well, anyway, that's all I have for this stream. I'm probably going to end it here. So, yeah. E3 is gone, or it's canceled for this year. So, really not a whole lot to look forward to in the gaming industry until, like, Gamescom. Final Fantasy 16, Tekken 8, maybe Tekken 8, UE5, whatever. So, that's going to be it for this stream. I'm extremely tired. I will catch you guys in the next one. So the next, for those wondering, because I know a lot of people ask, the next live stream I'm thinking might be Saturday evening. We'll see. Either tomorrow or Saturday will be the next one, and then after that it'll be Thursday again. So that'll be it. Every company is going to do their own conference now. Yeah, Sony kind of killed E3 when they stopped going. And then Blizzard just put everything into BlizzCon, although, BlizzCon ended up being very controversial for a few years. Anyway, that's going to be it for this stream. Once again, thank you everybody for watching, and I will catch you guys in the next one. Thanks.